All right. So we're gonna start at 7:04. Chair Williams,
Here.
Vice Chair Reese,
Present.
Commissioner Cornell. Here. Commissioner Dye,
Here.
Commissioner Herring,
Here.
Commissioner Duggan, Mayor Pro Tem Mahol,
Here.
and I'll put Chris is late and Glasser absent. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Let's do the approval of the minutes. Has everyone had a chance to review them and any comments or corrections, changes?
I will say I made some changes on the WebEx only in dates. Just in case that was on anyone's radar.
A couple of typos got fixed.
Which section?
You just said something. What
Yeah,
did you change?
I changed the date of the minutes because that was incorrect and WebEx only.
Okay.
To me, it looks spot on.
I make a motion that we approve the minutes as
Second.
written.
Vice Chair Reese,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Mahol,
Yes.
Commissioner Herring,
Yes.
Commissioner Duggan, Commissioner Cornell, Chair Williams,
Yes.
Commissioner Dye.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. What?
My bad. We're gone for month, but you were here.
Yeah, all right, I sandwiched in the 3-week trip right in between. You should be impressed with that, Roger. We are a planning commission. I'm still jet. I have that as an excuse.
That's pretty close.
Okay, do we have any public comment on anything that's not in the agenda? I see we have public. Okay, perfect. All right, having heard none, let's move on to our action items. What's that? Oh, do we have, yes, do we have anybody online from the public? Didn't see any earlier. Okay. We'll move on to our action items. Action item 5.1, moratorium on new STR licenses. And I guess it's up to you, Britt, to introduce that.
It's Miranda. I'm here too. I can do it.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so before you have a recommendation. We didn't actually get to this last time we talked about short-term rentals. We had talked a little bit about it with some commission members like Chair Williams and Vice Chair Reese about perhaps considering a moratorium for new short-term rental licenses. And the reason for that is really wanting to build some space for the Planning Commission to be able to work on the amendments to the short-term rental code, as well as the Board of Trustees, and recognizing that people might get anxious and want to come forward under the current regulations if they think they're going to change. And so we just think it's for the best in order to not create kind of a rush to get licenses, to put a moratorium. What that would mean is if you have a current license, you're welcome to continue to renew it, but you cannot apply for a new one because we're asking that it just be done on new licensures. Obviously, the Board of Trustees would be the decision maker on that, but we'd love the Planning Commission's opinion first. And if you do feel it's appropriate to recommend a moratorium, you would then direct staff and the town attorney to draft that ordinance, and we would bring it before the Board of Trustees in October. So happy to answer any questions you might have.
I'll take the first question, Miranda. I always think of moratoriums as responding to an emergency situation. What is our current situation and why do we need to do a moratorium now?
I think that I wouldn't say this is an emergency, but in recognizing, say, for example, the Planning Commission and Board of Trustees considers a cap. While you're working through that, which will take a couple months, we might see a huge influx in applications. And I think that's going in the opposite direction of maybe what you're trying to work through. So the thought is, give yourself some space. So no, it's not an emergency, but we do feel that there's value in just kind of putting a hold on new licenses while we figure out what makes the most sense. And that's why you're having that ask is like, I guess I view this moratorium as just more of a pause button than it is we have an emergency and need to stop something. It's just saying, well, we want to work on this ordinance and amend the language. We really need some space to do that without seeing a huge influx of new applications.
Do we have
This
any,
is-
any evidence of an influx of new applications?
So I think Macy is on. Macy, is that you?
Yeah, I'm here. So I hear an echo. You guys hear an echo, or is that just on my end?
I hear it as well. 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 I hear it as well.
Holy cow.
The only thing better than Roger Cornell is Roger Cornell in stereo over and over.
I haven't had a feeling like this.
Sorry about that, guys. Is it any better?
Hi, Roger.
That's perfect.
Okay. So yeah, I do get inquiries, and since we met on August 30th, I have issued one new license, and I have had serious inquiries for, I would say, from four other people that are most likely going to result in licensure. So yeah, I can speak to that as of in the last 30 days. And then I would say that also we would recommend the moratorium just to like, while we're streamlining our process, because for example, if we're gonna switch up our requirements or switch up what the licensing looks like and remove classes of licenses, then I'm not sure it makes sense to be issuing new licenses at this time while we are going to be changing the rules very soon. And then those new licenses may not align with the new regulations.
Yeah, because as I understand it, everything's grandfathered in. So once they have a license and we change, potentially change things, then they would be exempt. I think that was one of the reasons why we talked about having a moratorium.
Can I just weigh in here?
Please.
Yes, so it is very typical when the Board of Trustees Planning Commission is reviewing changes to an ordinance that would require an ordinance that requires applications and processing to put in place a moratorium and to even put in place an emergency moratorium. The reason for an emergency moratorium is that the moratorium then would take effect immediately. So if the Board of Trustees were to agree to the moratorium and pass the moratorium ordinance on Tuesday, October 3rd, then Macy could not accept any applications starting on October 4th because the ordinance takes effect immediately. And that is typical in most communities that this is done. And really it just allows for what Macy and Miranda were talking about in terms of any changes to the ordinance. It allows for thoughtful consideration without having to process and spend the time processing and approving a license that maybe is not one that would be issued once the new rules are put in place.
If there were an application between now and the 4th saying that a moratorium did go into effect, how would that impact that application?
Well, the moratorium, if it were passed as an emergency moratorium, an application that was submitted prior to October 4th or October 3rd, really, would still need to be processed.
Okay. Thank you.
Roger, do you have a question?
Well, my comment would be that, because I agree with everything that's been said. It's a good question. It's a subject we need to discuss, but just the fact that it's under review has brought it to the attention of the public. So I think, just as the attorney said, yes, you wouldn't want, as you're working on the process, to have applications coming in. So, but just the fact that we're doing it has alerted people, oh, I better get this application in. So I think that's, for me, that's actually the deciding point of why I feel that we should do the moratorium.
Question though, what's the good we're trying to protect here? What's the problem we're trying to solve? I'd go back to town on that.
Well, Mayor Pro Tem Mahold, what if the decision is to put a cap on the number of licenses that you issue? And between now and completion of an ordinance that's effective, you have a number of people who submit an application and that effectively puts you over that cap. I mean, that is certainly possible. So that would be a main reason for putting in place a moratorium.
I think the other thing I would add is really just recognizing that we're trying to assess housing stock. And as applications come forward, that will obviously turn things into short-term rentals instead of any long-term rentals.
Miranda, how many are we talking about, do you think realistically that are, I mean, we don't have a lot of structures. We have 715, of which 690 are single family. How many are in play right now? And how, I'm just trying to judge how big an issue we're trying to get around here.
Macy, do you want to go over your numbers?
So can you please clarify what numbers you would like the percentage of housing stock versus short-term rental?
The number
Yeah,
of
I'm
short-term rentals. Oh,
Yeah, I'm
sorry.
trying to judge how many are in play and why we think we have an emergency, but I don't have any data that indicates that we do.
So we determined in our last aim that we had sent you all, that data is still not in this one, that it was just shy of 10% of the housing was short-term rental. And so I think to your question, no, we can't predict how many more might come online. I think just kind of human behavior is to, if you know something's going to become regulated, you're going to try to come in under the regulation. So we're not sure. And I guess that's kind of back to, as Attorney Matson was saying, is like just creating that space while we assess how we want to handle short-term rentals and say there's no cap and we continue forward. Well, then those people just wait for a little bit longer before they can apply for their short-term rental.
If I were in their shoes, I would be asking, how long are you talking about? 60 days?
Our recommendation was 6 months. The Planning Commission could offer something different. The only reason we were saying that is when the subcommittee was formed, we did say this didn't have a huge emergency. Now, there could be a task on staff in this subcommittee to work quicker and come up with regulations faster. I think all of those are in play and open to discussion. If we do move forward with the moratorium, is would you want to see it shortened? But then that puts the pressure on Commissioner Herring and Chair Williams to work with us to get an ordinance done pretty quickly.
Well, it's my intent to try to do this fairly quickly. And matter of fact, we have our kickoff meeting tomorrow. So we're not wasting any time getting started. But I think this sort of, the idea that was discussed last time was just to give us a little more flexibility. Like as Attorney Matson said, if we want to talk about a cap, and if we're talking like 10%, all of a sudden we have 12%, applications then of course that changes our flexibility.
Is it feasible to have this concluded by the end of the year? Do we really need 6 months?
No, I think it's up to 6 months. Is that the way it's written? I mean, we can shorten that.
Yeah,
But-
you get your ordinance done and drafted and approved, and at the same time you can lift the moratorium.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I could live with, until date, but 6 months seems like a long time to me. And I kind of look at moratoriums like I look at the First Amendment. You're basically, if somebody owns property and I think people buy property for any number of reasons, but they have the right to use the property for whatever reason they choose, and we're depriving them of that. for a period of time, and I'd like that to be as short as possible.
Right.
Philosophically, at least.
No, I'm full agreement with that. Any other questions before we open it up to public comment?
I would just like to ask, I mean, the numbers aren't exactly 10%, and it's a little less than that. It's I think I did the math, it was 50 something out of the housing stock of 650 to 700. And I'd like to know, I guess, how does that compare to other towns similar to ours? Is that high compared to other towns? Or I mean, what's the relative, you know,
So I
housing
can
stock?
speak to that. So typically when they cap at percentage, they do it at around 10%, and we're right at that cusp at 8%. And if they do a numeric cap, they're typically choosing a cap like 50, which we are currently over at 54. So it depends on what type of cap we choose, but if we chose a cap as 50, a numeric cap, which is what other towns do, we would be over that cap already.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? We'll come back to the commission for further discussion, but I'll now open it up for public comment. And if you would come up to the mic and state your name and address, please. You have 3 minutes.
Okay. Hi, I'm Stephanie Ridgway, owner of 155 East 2nd Street. And I'm going to read a letter that I wrote at the end of August. So maybe you guys have seen this, but I'll just read it. My husband and I have owned our home for over 9 years, and we bought our property in Nederland as a vacation home where we could go with our family to the nearby mountains, closer to nature and away from hectic Boulder where we have to work. And out of financial necessity, we started doing short-term renting in 2017, well before there were any regulations for STRs. We have a grandfathered Class B non-primary residential license, which we got as soon as they were permitted. And we've been fully licensed and fully compliant ever since then. Who are our renters? This year, we rented to 7 parties. 3 of the renters were local NED people or families of NED residents. And 2 other of the renter groups were people who were moving to NED for work, and they rented our place to search for longer term housing. Last year was even more striking. 4 out of 4 renters were NED residents, like doing renovations or family coming in. We try to house local NED folks as much as we can. And as a family with children ourselves, we frequently have rented homes when we travel, just like our own place in downtown. It offers a more economical way to travel with a little more space and to feel a little bit more comfortable. I thought I might share some of our actual numbers with you to illustrate our own scale of our STR. This year, we collected $8,300, and we paid $1,100, about 13%, to local cleaners and yard people that we hired to help us with the property. We're allowed to rent for 45 days per year, and every year we get requests for more renters than we can accommodate. I just had 2 NED families ask for Thanksgiving and Christmas, and I couldn't say yes because we had used up our days. I think that compliant STR license holders should be grandfathered in with any new ordinance moving forward. This is especially true for STRs like our own that's never had any complaints or late fees assessed. There's only 6 Class B non-primary residence STR licenses like ourselves. They're all grandfathered. They haven't been issued since September of 2020, and they will eventually just decrease when people don't renew a license, or if they lose a license, or if the property sells. We recognize that STRs could be better neighbors in NED. And first of all, our family feels that there should be no access to fire pits. We don't think that non-locals know how to deal with fire, how to put them out properly. I think that you could ask STR owners to have adequate parking on site or designated public parking that meets that requirement. If not, and I think that trash and recycling must not be stored outside for the safety of our local wildlife. And we also have some additional house rules for our own STR that work really well for us and I think our neighbors. Quiet hours inside and outside, 9 p.m. to 8 a.m. No parties or events ever allowed inside or outside. No smoking of any kind inside or outside. Minimum rental age, 35. We recommend vehicles with all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive, and no garbage or recycling outside of the home ever. So anyway, that's our standpoint. I'd love to help you guys, if I can, craft this. We really care and want to stay active with us. Anyway, thanks for listening.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
One question on your classification Macy's on, which category of license is it? B? Okay,
Of which there are 6, I believe.
yeah.
Yeah.
And do we know if that would be grandfathered in? If the,
Yes.
okay, yeah,
Yes.
that's what I thought.
Right. And thank you for behaving and being a model STR owner.
And taking care of our neighbors.
Yes. Yeah.
Can you clarify one thing for me? Is the grandfathering in a legal requirement? I mean, that's a town question for the town lawyer.
It is not. It's not. That's something that
What?
the
Could you repeat the
grandfathering in
question?
is not. So there, you could have a
it's not.
process.
It's
Can you
not.
hear me?
Okay.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
We missed that beginning part there. Please continue.
I'm sorry. Okay. Grandfathering is not a legal requirement. Should the town decide, should the Board of Trustees, Planning Commission recommend that changes be made to existing licenses, then you could make those changes. The licenses renew every year, so somebody doesn't necessarily have a right to a license on that next renewal period. So there is really no grandfathering in.
Unless we stipulate that. Is that what you're saying?
Well, there's nothing in the ordinance right now that somebody has a property right to a certain class of a license in perpetuity. The town cannot, there are certain steps that you'd have to take if you wanted to take away a license. Right now, if somebody held a license, there would typically need to be notice and hearing. But if you wanted to just do away with short-term rental licenses, that would be something that potentially you could do. There's no legal right to be able to rent your property as a short-term rental, because you have other uses for your property. You can long-term rent, you can live in the home. There's no legal right for short-term renting.
So just for clarification, the existing licenses for this year, those would be grandfathered in, they wouldn't be revoked. However, when that license for that year expires and would be up for renewal, that if, say, Class B licenses went away, then it would not be possible to renew. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah.
Unless we write something in.
Unless we put something in.
Okay.
Well, right. But I mean, if you decide that, the Class
Yeah.
B licenses are appropriate and that's something that you want to continue and allow, then you don't necessarily have to put anything in code. You just wouldn't change what you already have that's existing in code.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else from the public that's online? Can't really tell. Okay. All right, I'll go ahead and close the public comment section, bring it back to the commission. And let's start with Stephanie online. Any comments? Now, we're talking about, the moratorium tonight. We obviously will be hashing through all the details as part of the subcommittee.
Right. Okay. Yeah, so specifically regarding the moratorium, I do think that's probably a good idea in order to, for some of the reasons that were mentioned earlier. I won't belabor the point, but I do, yeah, I would support that. Thanks.
Okay. Tim?
Yeah, I would say I'd be in support of the moratorium. I think there's enough and a variety of topics that I think warrant discussion, given where we're at with the town and the number of short-term rentals and how those have been used over the last couple of years. And we've got a lot of information, like from Stephanie, thank you, that I think is really applicable to the conversation moving forward and how we can sort of optimize things moving forward. So yeah, while I don't think it's an emergency necessarily, I do think it is sort of a crux point in how this town regulates short-term rentals that warrants some further discussion and the time to do so.
Mike?
Yeah, I'd support a moratorium as well. 6 months does seem like a long time, but I know time also goes really fast.
How's it going with that keeping animals subcommittee there, buddy? How long has that been? going?
About
Now,
18 months,
Yeah.
longer than my term. So
Yeah, maybe that's not too long.
yeah, well, that's what I was saying. Time goes quickly. And also housing moves slow relative to some things like goats, but there is a housing emergency, and short-term rentals is a component of that. Yeah.
okay.
I've
Yeah,
got
another comment? Yep, go ahead.
to say, one member of the public wrote in a great email raising the point about the difference between short-term rentals where the host is present, 100% of the time versus when they're not present. You can only rent it out 180 days. And she made the point that, we shouldn't necessarily put a cap on those kind of rentals because the primary residents living there all the time anyways. There's really not a lot to worry about. So I don't know if we want to limit, we could potentially consider limiting the moratorium to just short-term rentals where the host is not present. I don't know if we can make that sort of division, but maybe that's something to consider as well. And maybe it doesn't matter. I don't know how many people are waiting in line to file an application for a primary resident 365 days short-term rental, but something to consider.
Actually, that's a great point, Timmy. I actually would support that modification. If it's an HTR for a host who is fully present and it's not a whole house rental, I would be in favor of that.
So that's when the owner is living there. Is that what you're saying?
I think that's a great idea. Support that too.
Jim?
Well, I think that if you start trying to carve it up like that, it's going to be tough. But my theory on it is that we're looking, we're going to talk in our next agenda item about trying to increase housing stock here in Nederland. And I think what we're trying to do is cap where we're at, give the Planning Commission and the BOT a chance to come forward, look at, study, and make some recommendations. And I think there's a concern, at least what I'm hearing from the staff, that we might get an influx of maybe 5, 10, maybe even more if the word gets out, hey, we've got, people that are working on changing these rules right now, folks, and the word starts to spread through town, and maybe there's 15 or 20 people over the next 6-month period that are managed to get that application, because all they got to do is get it turned in. And then they're legally allowed to have that, and that changes things, and it changes things. So I would argue back that I think that having a moratorium now while we look at the issues, potential cap, what kind of percentage, what kind of STRs we want to allow, I think that would be a much more direct and cleaner way to accomplish that goal and allow the room for those subcommittee members to do that without. And honestly, I'm going to tell you, I think that it's going to be pretty challenging for the staff to, I could be wrong. I'll allow Macy or somebody, whoever the appropriate person is, to answer back. But I wonder how easy would it be to craft a moratorium that is specific to the class of license? Do you have an idea on that, Macy?
Well, I will defer to Attorney Madsen for that specific question, because, yeah. Do you mind helping with that one, Jennifer?
Sure. It could be crafted. You could draft a moratorium ordinance that does not affect primary resident licenses with the host present. However, I would caution that you don't know. I mean, this is the situation. You don't have a crystal ball. You don't know what you're going to do related to changes and amendments to the short-term licensing regulations. And you could impact that type of license. So my recommendation would just be to put a moratorium over all of the license types. It's possible you might get some public comment feedback that changes your opinion on those licenses. And you wouldn't want to exempt them out if perhaps you do change regulations related to the host present licenses.
Okay, thank you. That helps clarify that. So I will just reiterate that I would support the moratorium in total on new STR licenses being issued until such a time that we could study it and bring new information back to the Planning Commission and the BOT.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Roger?
Oh, we had a healthy discussion, and I think we've given the Board of Trustees a lot of options, a lot of feedback. In the end, they're going to have to take all this discussion, and they will be the ones that actually will come up with it. And I agree with Attorney Madsen and Jim's point of view that, and people still have 1 week to put in their application if they want to get that thing, for that one exception we were talking about, if there was someone actually out there. But really, it's been the give and take, and all this information will be very valuable for the discussion for the Board of Trustees. So that's where I'm at, and I think we should just move to approve the moratorium in total.
Okay, Tom?
I have no vote, so I'll preface it with that. I disagree completely with what Commissioner Reese is saying about things that are hypothetically could happen because there's no data to back it up. It could happen. A lot of things could happen. I disagree philosophically with moratoriums in general is depriving somebody's right. And especially when we don't have a lot of data, but I won't be voting tonight, but I will be voting on the Board of Trustees side of the fence.
Gee, I wonder how you're gonna vote.
Maybe you'll get sick or something.
What's that? Okay, is Chris?
Yeah, he's online.
Okay, Chris is online. Chris, you have some comments?
I do. First, I guess question is for Attorney Madsen. From a legal standpoint, if I wanted to have my family stay here and charge them a nightly rate to stay in my home, is that legal? Does the town need to be involved?
And you don't have a short-term rental license.
Correct.
So for less than 29 days or less, you would need a short-term rental license. You could not charge your family to stay in your house without
I'm not allowed to collect funds from person to person transfer.
Right.
And
Gotcha.
what under what authority is that?
Under the short-term rental licensing regulations that are in the town code, that it's unlawful to allow somebody to stay in your home and for compensation for a time period that's less than 29 days.
So if I want to let someone borrow my car and charge them, am I allowed to charge them to borrow my car without
Yep.
the government being involved?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what gives the town a right to do one and not the other?
Well, the town could potentially regulate the car rentals as well. But the regulation of short-term rentals is for health, safety, and welfare of the community. There is, when that ordinance was put into place, there was public comment by people in the town of Nederland that there were impacts associated with short-term rentals. Impacts being, increased noise, complaints of parties. There
Health,
is,
welfare, and safety, you're saying?
yes,
And so when you own a home, you pay taxes to a town, and that pays for support services like police, water, sewer, safety, health, welfare, right?
yes.
Regardless of the person being in the home, right?
Yeah, I will tell you that there are court cases that have upheld short-term rental licensing regulations as a lawful regulation implemented by a municipal governing body. So it is a
That's good to
lawful
know.
regulation. It's been tested in a number of court cases throughout the country.
Okay.
And courts have held that it's a permissible regulation.
Okay. I think the way I look at a lot of these, like Airbnbs, Ubers, and whatnot, like I was just on a business trip this week, and Uber is not the best game in town anymore. They used to be, it was a good idea. It was, disruptive to the taxi industry. And at this point, it's so expensive. I'd rather take a taxi at this point. And, short-term rentals and Airbnbs and the services alike, in a sense, are, you know, have some value to some people, not to others. Um, you know, I think the legality and people looking at, whether or not it's disruptive. I think no one in town wants anything disruptive, whether you're the homeowner in the home or someone visiting or a short-term rental. I think that's something that can be addressed in general. The way I look at it is we need to solve our policing issue and staffing issue, and make sure that people understand fire code and understand noise ordinances. And anyone who is having anyone stay anywhere should make sure that they're being good neighbors. And that's something that, to me, can be handled. As far as the vote, I'm probably gonna go ahead and decline from voting, just through conflict of interest. I think based on job changes with my wife and I, a 6-month moratorium would definitely affect us, and I'd be biased in wanting everyone to vote no on a moratorium. So I'm gonna elect not to vote. I think it's something. I think Mayor Pro Tem Home had a good point. Is what is the public need, the emergency to prevent an issue? I don't see it. Doesn't make sense to me. Yeah, I'm gonna abstain from voting, but I think everybody should think about and really whoever is on the subcommittee should really engage with people who are involved in short-term rentals and understand the value they bring to the community. We have one hotel in town. I mean, I know we have a couple out in the outskirts, but you know, they're able to support 50 people a night with 20 to 25 rooms, and they're not booked up. Whereas short-term rentals are being used, and what is a good amount for the town? That is something I guess to consider. But yeah, I don't know. That's kind of where I stand on it. I'm gonna refrain from voting tonight.
Okay, thank you, Chris, for bringing that up, because I should have asked if anyone had any conflict of interest. So I'll just finish up comments by, since Stephanie and I are on the subcommittee. This will be coming back to the Planning Commission. We'll be reporting back. We have our first meeting tomorrow, actually kickoff meeting. And I personally, in deference to Tom's comments, I like the flexibility of being able to work without the rug being pulled out from under me. So I think the moratorium is a good idea. I also like the idea of just do a blanket one. I'm cognizant of the impact that it may have on people and new applications. So we will do our utmost to try to get this through as quickly as possible and to the board for their vote.
One last comment.
Yes.
I talked with the folks over in Telluride this morning.
Oh, yeah, I was going to ask you about
They've
that.
gone in the opposite direction. They went through a very restrictive policy and they came out and the other side said this is not workable. And they went to a libertarian point of view. That's one town, but everybody, there's a lot of us wrestling with it right now. So you're not having to deal with a board of their size, but 2 is a good place to start. And I hope we can get to a solution pretty quickly. I don't want to drag this on any longer than we have to.
Okay, well, I'd like to chat a little bit more about that as part of the subcommittee information gathering. So that would be good. Okay. So I would like, unless there's any other comments, I would like to go ahead and make a motion that the town staff and town attorney draft an ordinance instituting up to a 6-month moratorium on all new STR license applications for the BOT to consider for adoption.
Second.
Do I have a second?
I second.
Roger seconds.
Commissioner Dye?
Before we vote,
Oh.
Is there any final comment? I can't vote, but I would ask for something shorter than 6 months.
Well, I used the term up to 6 months. I don't anticipate it will take 6 months, but again, from the flexibility point of view, okay, unless anyone else has any issues with 6 months.
Don't want to pet the puppy anymore.
Okay,
Okay.
that's right. Go ahead. Well, it's not in my motion, but yeah.
Are we in the middle of a vote right now?
No, a discussion,
We're at
just a
discussion.
second, and a discussion.
On the motion.
And the Board of Trustees is going to hash this all out. I don't know why we're beating ourselves up.
Make sure you're speaking into your mics. Not everyone can hear everyone.
You want?
Yes, I am.
Any other comments?
Question. So Brett, this goes, we vote yes tonight to this, then the next process is it goes to the next Board of Trustees meeting, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay, any more discussion? We'll move on with the vote.
Commissioner Dye,
Yes.
Vice Chair Reese,
Yes.
Commissioner Herring,
Yes.
Commissioner Duggan,
I've changed my mind. I'm gonna vote no.
Chair Williams,
Yes.
Commissioner Cornell.
Yes.
Chris, he abstained. But he should do that on the record.
Oh, yes. Chris, could
I
you?
abstain.
Thank
Yes,
you.
thank you.
Okay. Motion passes. All right, let's move on to discussion items. We have 3 discussion items. The first one on the agenda is the Housing Needs Assessment Code amendments. And are you going to introduce this one?
Yes, I will. So at the August 30th PC meeting, Derek Webb, senior planner at Bohannon Houston, and town staff presented some strategies based on the feedback we got from the housing survey, interactive map, public feedback, and public workshops. Last meeting, as you guys remember, we asked for 2 volunteers to form the housing subcommittee. Mayor Pro Tem Mahold and Vice Chair Reese volunteered for that. The team focused their efforts on the following: allowing small square footage residential units and smaller square footage lot sizes, develop flexibility in land occupancy requirement, increase town support and clarify procedures for the development of affordable and diverse housing options, identify opportunities to expedite the development review process for affordable housing development. From these strategies, the team focused on the following code changes: development of ADUs before the primary structure is constructed. Under the current ADU, you cannot develop it prior to your primary structure. Many developers are looking to build an ADU to live in while they're working on their primary structure, and that has not, and not allowing that has been a cost barrier for many developers in the past. Therefore, the subcommittee has recommended allowing ADUs to be constructed first. The committee also recommended a removal of requirement that the ADU and/or primary structure must be occupied by the property owner. By removing the stipulation, it allows both the primary home and the ADU to be rented, not just one or the other, which adds rental housing to the market. I would like to add a side note. With all of this STR discussion, I think it's a good idea to keep in mind, most people's mindset goes to, oh, these are going to be both short-term rental, but with it looking like there could be a possibility of the cap, I think this allows the opportunity for both to be long-term rentals. I think it's good to keep options open, that not everyone's looking to short-term rental. Another thing the committee looked at was noted that if the yard in bulk allows a parcel could have more than 1 ADU. Currently, our code only allows 1 ADU, but if the parcel is big enough and someone's able to, we felt it would be great to allow more than 1 ADU if they can do it appropriately with their setbacks, because that would just increase our housing stock as well. The next thing we focused on was administrative variance. It has been noted by town staff that there's a great deal of parcels available that are non-conforming lots, which means in order to develop them, a variance is required before the BZA. The application process can be costly and not only takes quite a bit of time. And the BZA typically, if it's a minimum variance, the BZA typically approves without hesitation. In an effort to remove the BZA application barrier, the subcommittee is recommending that town staff be allowed to approve administrative variances up to 15% deviation for all yard and bulk requirements except for height. Something else I did want to note is this is something that other towns are doing. Boulder currently allows a 20% variance administratively approved. And other towns like Lyons and even Erie, they allow anywhere from 5 to 20%, but theirs are more specific based on the variance allowed. Another thing that we focused on is alternative housing in use group table. Currently, under our residential use, it lists where multifamily up to 4 units and over 4 units are allowed. Since there are a variety of different types of housing, the subcommittee recommended developing a new use group table specifically for residential uses that list all alternative housing and where they could be allowed use by right. Currently, the table attached has almost all housing types used by right in each zone. At the September PC meeting, the board will help classify the chart and kind of assess where it should be allowed and where it shouldn't be allowed. Another thing that the team focused on is the yard and bulk variance for deed restricted affordable housing. In an effort to encourage development of deed restricted affordable housing, the subcommittee recommends allowing up to 50% variance in yard and bulk requirements, except for height again. So developers can really maximize that lot space. The subcommittee developed the attached yard and bulk table for illustrative purposes, so the PC could see the 50% variance, kind of what it looks like. It is recommended that this use group table not be included in our code, in Netherlands code, but rather language in the code state the developer of the deed restricted affordable housing unit can seek up to 50% variation if needed. And they would discuss those yard and bulk variances with myself, the community planner. The reason for this is we want developers to seek minimum relief as possible versus automatically defaulting to that 50%. Some of them might be able to do with 30, 20. So we just don't want it to be a table showing go max it out at 50%. Some of our questions before the board tonight is what initial feedback does the PC have regarding to the recommended code changes to promote alternative and affordable housing? Does the PC support allowing ADUs to be constructed before the primary homes? Does the PC support allowing staff to approve administrative yard and bulk variances up to 15%? What are the PC's thought on the alternative housing condition or additions? What changes would you like to see to do that use group table? Where would you like them allowed, not allowed, SRUs? Does the PC want to see a yard and bulk table to show the variance allowed for the deed restricted to affordable housing? Or would the PC prefer to see that strong language to have this option available, but leave the percentages open to that up to 50%? So with that, I'm going to kick it over to Derek. If Derek has anything to add on to this, as you saw in your packet, there was we added all of that information to you for you to review. Derek, if you want to add anything, if not, we'll just open it up for questions.
Yeah, I think I just add, obviously there's a lot to digest there. So I think the PowerPoint that we've included in the packet is meant to help facilitate that conversation. So we can work through that if you want. I'm happy to bring up a Word version of kind of those code changes that we're suggesting, the red line versions that are also attached to the packet. So we can tweak and kind of focus on particular spots within that code language if you need. But yeah, it seems like the best option is to open it up to conversation and see where it goes and what particular edit or tweak we're talking about and needs to come up on the screen.
Okay, thank you. Any comments from subcommittee members before we do that?
Yeah. Okay, so some of these things are pretty big changes from what we've been looking at. And it was hard for me even to wrap my head around the idea of maybe allowing more than one ADU and a lot next door to me or something like that. But as I talked with Derek and we talked in the subcommittee, the purpose of what we are trying to do is incentivize increasing housing stock in Nederland. That's where the STR piece comes in, why we're talking about caps, because right now we have a huge, if you remember back to Derek's presentation last month, we have a huge affordability crisis in Nederland for housing, for people that, can afford $2,000, $2,500 a month. We do not have that amount. And so these are meant to look at bold actions to possibly encourage and spur new housing starts in Nederland. So when there's going to be people that are going to say, what about this? What about this? You have to think back on, okay, what is the problem we're trying to solve? We're not trying to make it so that the neighbor has less people to worry about next door. We're trying to increase the housing stock and make Nederland more accessible to people that can't currently afford to live here. That's my only comment. Have an open mind, please.
I'm amazed at what we were able to do in 2 or 3 sessions. I mean, we've really blown through a lot of, it was good homework. Thanks to you guys, the staff work. But bottom line, we got 100 to 120 houses we're short. The median in July was $860,000. That requires $220,000 of household income. So we got a problem because jobs don't support it. At the same time, we have to balance it against the types of things that concern me and concern you. Density has costs, especially it's in a town with the ethos that we have. We didn't come here to be right next to somebody, but I think that the things we've made real good progress. I don't think we're completely there yet, but we're doing a lot of what ifing, and it's beginning to make sense. We're going to bring it back to you shortly, and you'll like some of it, you won't like some of it. It'll take some time to get your head around some of it, but we have to be cognizant of why we came here, why other people come here, what extent that we need to make this go on in perpetuity, but understand that density comes with accommodation, and that I walked around town, as I usually do most mornings, and talked with a number of town staff that rent here and don't see themselves here in 5 years because they're in rental situations that may or may not persist, and it puts them in a state of angst. And so we got some things to balance, and I think I'm really delighted we made progress. I'm not completely sure I'm comfortable yet with where we're going, but I think we're going to need to accommodate different types of housing that don't require a combined household income of $220,000 a year if we want people to be here to work with us. We're seeing it right off the bat with a restaurant that opened this week that's 6 days a week because they can't find enough people for 7. And this is going to be a struggle. So, Jim, onward we go.
Okay, with that cheery introduction. So, Britt, how do you want to do this? Do you want to go through each of the bullet points one by one and get feedback on them?
So we can, like Derek was saying, we can go through one by one, and we can kind of pull up that, the PowerPoint as well to kind of help us facilitate through that. Cause I know a couple of you have questions that you mentioned you're going to have questions for us. Yeah, let's start at the bullet points.
Well,
Unless, do we want to run through specific questions?
what would the subcommittee prefer? How do you want the input? Would you rather have it a fire hose, or do you want, a little bit more
Structure?
structure?
Yeah.
Brett, I'll leave that up to you.
Well, I guess we could start with, let's go ahead and start with that first bullet point. What initial feedback does the PC have regarding the recommended code changes to promote that alternative and affordable housing?
Jim and I have seen these for a while. Some of you are just seeing them now, so I'll defer to each of you.
And please let me know if you want Derek to bring up, or myself, to bring up, the tables or any of the language to really just give that visual too.
Okay.
Steve, could I say something right off the top?
Go right ahead.
Well, if we just spent an hour on discussing the moratorium, I feel like the development of the accessory dwelling units, ADU, the first as a primary structure, each one of these bullets to me is almost an agenda item. If we spend an hour on that other discussion, I certainly think that we should just work through each one of these, because in my mind, it's not such simple answer is, just quick discussion and a motion to approve these things. But yeah, it's a huge zoning change.
Yeah, and it's good to keep in mind that this would basically be a recommendation at our next meeting to then go to the Board of Trustees because this needs to be adopted by the end of the year. So this is something that if we need the time for discussion, we really need to take the time because you guys will be voting on this next meeting.
Let's frame it though. The main reason we're having this discussion tonight is the 7 units we committed to. So yeah, I outlined a much bigger problem. Really what we're trying to solve for is 7 affordable units within 3 years. That's a totally different discussion, much smaller.
The number that have been increased in this town.
The Board of Trustees
The prop
signed up
ones and
for coming up with 7 affordable units within 3 years. That's a pretty small ask compared to what you and I have been looking at over the last few weeks.
These are subsidized units as part of a housing program or?
It's something that fits Boulder County's guidelines, yeah.
Gotcha.
In return, we get funding, pretty significant funding for signing up to 7 units. It was based on a percentage of our installed stock, so that doesn't sound like a heavy lift to me.
Gotcha.
So I'm not sure, Roger, we need to solve it all tonight.
No, I'm not. I was just saying, the discussion of each item is not, we need to have a discussion of each bullet point.
Okay, well, why don't we start with
Yeah.
the ADUs then? Start with the first one then, that we're talking about, because I know you have some comments about the idea of allowing, so let's talk about the first one. What we were talking about allowing the person who is buying the property, or I'm sorry, that's not the first one, is it?
Well, it's the second one, but
It's the second, but we can talk about it. I know a lot of people have an opinion on the property owner not having to live on the property and being able to rent out both units. So if we want to discuss that specific code language.
I think Roger would like to go through. So can you pull up on the presentation, page 24? And that will show what we're recommending. And the first one being allow small square footage residential units and smaller square footage lot sizes. What I guess we need to do is kind of get discussion on and go down the list. And I guess we neglected to talk about the reason we did not choose to look at the other 3 after discussion on the first time we met. We met 3 times with the staff and with Derek, our expert on this, was that they're looking at some of the things that impact housing are PIF fees and the fees that cost to start a house. There's going to be, I can't remember the time frame, but Miranda said they're looking at a new fee schedule. Is that right? Britt, do you remember that was the reason we weren't going to talk about that, was because there was a fee study happening?
For the PIF fees?
Yeah.
Correct. Yes, that is happening. Our utilities department has to have a fee study. And they're working right now with a company to try to get that done. And they are looking at an affordability piece. Are we able to allow for these smaller PIF fees for affordable housing, or is it something that we just can't do as a town?
So that's a barrier. And we looked at, we decided, okay, we got to wait on that until we can get the data, comes back for that. The density bonus program was going to, I'm just telling you why we didn't choose the other 3. The density bonus program was more in depth and involved in what we thought we could do in the time frame we had. And then when we start talking about streamlining the planned unit development process, again, there was a desire to try and get something to the planning or to the BOT for them to vote on by the end of the year. And that was going to be such a large lift that we chose to focus on what was attainable, which were the 4 that we have left on the screen there, 1, 2, 3, and 5. And so if we want to go down and talk about, those in order and get the information, that would be great. And I know that my thing, I wasn't 100% in agreement on all these. I want you to know that this wasn't all just a consensus fest when we were talking about it. I pushed back on a lot of issues. But again, we're putting back to the forefront. We're looking at ways to encourage new housing starts and additional housing units in Nederland. And so these were some bold things. So if we just want to start with 1, allow square footage residential units. We're looking at, you know, some of the, if you look deeper into the packet, they talk about tiny homes and different small homes and different sizes. And we were looking at the possibility of allowing additional housing units, you know, reducing the amount of square footage needed to allow additional housing units on there. So, you know, this would probably be the best place to start there if people have problems or questions about that.
Yeah, so Derek, I don't know if you want to pull up, because this kind of goes with it, maybe those alternative housing options we've presented. I think that's going to be a big, you know, we'll save ADUs for next, but that's going to be a big thing. Do we want to allow these in all zones? Do you guys think the definitions of housing we've put here is appropriate? Are there some we should take away? Are there additions you're thinking of? You know, where again, where is it most appropriate? Do you think it's most appropriate in all zones? Because that's what we have it as right now, just as an example. But this is what that table would look like, and this is one of the tables that would be staying in our code. And I don't know if we want to go commissioner by commissioner, if somebody wants to speak up first, they feel strongly about it or not.
It's a discussion item, so I
Yeah.
prefer people to just sort of chime in.
Yeah.
As, because there's a lot of.
There's a lot of information, but what the information we get tonight is what we're going to be coming back with for language next meeting.
Right.
I think that's really important to keep in mind. There is a timeline because of this grant. And so I'm not pushing anyone to give any answers, but this does have to go to the Board of Trustees. And so whatever you guys are saying to us tonight is what we're going to really take back to the subcommittee, town staff, and Bohannon Houston and draft some language for the Board of Trustee. And of course, we have enough time for them to go through discussion as well, and this could change again, but this is recommendation. As of next meeting, you'll be voting on, yeah, this is something we feel comfortable pushing forward towards the BOT to then further decide on and adopt as of December.
I'll start the ball rolling. So do I understand correctly that the definition for this purpose of affordable is below 100% of the AMI for the region? Could you speak a little bit about, I know this is like the HUD standard, but why you chose that as opposed to something lower?
I'll leave that to Derek.
Okay. I was like, who's gonna field that? Yeah, so I think the key to remember about this project specifically was that it wasn't necessarily about subsidized housing. We weren't looking to try to identify opportunities necessarily for funding or anything like that that would pay for through the town. It's not a town subsidy for housing. What we are trying to do is identify ways that we can incentivize increased development of housing in the community in an appropriate manner and increase different types of housing. So if you recall from a month ago, we talked about the divide between the number of single-family dwelling units in the town versus the number of alternative types. So, you know, if it's apartments, if it's townhomes, that kind of stuff. I believe at the time, and I don't have the number in front of me, but I feel like the number of single-family homes, single-family detached dwelling units in the town was somewhere around 93%. And really that has a huge piece on when you induce a variety of housing types, you can also induce affordability within that. Also inducing, you know, more supply can help induce some affordability, right? So that was one reason. I think the other reason is that if we're looking at household incomes within Nederland, when we're looking at industry wages within Nederland, and we're thinking about workforce housing. So, you know, there was a point made earlier about the restaurant just opening up and can only open up for 6 days out of the 7 because they can't find enough staff. We also want to make sure that we're targeting the workforce component of the affordability scale as well. So we're working in a few communities throughout the state. We've also been keeping an eye on some of the housing needs assessments that have been coming out. And that range is typically up to 120% AMI or at 100% or lower. So we felt it was appropriate to suggest or to recommend that you consider the AMI scale starting at 100% or lower. That doesn't negate something down at 30%, but it also doesn't, you know, negate something at 100%. that help clarify?
Yes, that does.
Okay.
I really have a problem with it being at 100%. I mean, 100%. So a restaurant worker, if assuming minimum wage, which that's what they're hiring at right now, that's $31,200 a year. 100%, that's for a family of two, 100,000 or 87,000 for one. That means that this is not going to impact the restaurant workers and the lower wage people that are the people that really most need our help. I realize that, it's pretty much impossible without subsidized housing to build anything like for much, but if we build a bunch of tiny houses and rent them out for 1,800 a month, that's not going to help anybody but the rich people. I'd really strongly recommend setting the bar lower than 100. I don't have a specific number in mind, but I think 100 is way too high. I think that's aiming for the wrong target.
I have a response if I may. Is that all right?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. I think it's also important to note too that there may be people in an income category higher than that are currently occupying housing that would fit that need. So by incentivizing and getting more housing development in the town that fits the higher categories, you might have people move out of those situations that would open up housing options for people in the lower income categories as well. So while we're not necessarily targeting the 80% or the 60% specifically, by inducing more housing, there's the potential to open up more housing options for people in those categories.
And I think that the intent is we're not focusing on this for the affordable income. We're just trying to increase the housing stock. And what you said, I take issue with. If you did get a bunch of tiny homes built, let's say we had 20 additional living units that were built in our town, I think that would cause other rents, by comparison to have to come down. At least that's the intent of what we're trying to do. If we can increase the housing stock, then maybe it's not going to cost $3,500 to rent a house in town. And so we're looking for incentives, right, to try and increase. And when we talked about that, I think we determined that there was only, did you tell us that there was how many new housing starts were there over the last year, roughly? Can you give us off the top of your head?
I think typically we have about 2 to 3, 5 at a max, but 5 is not really typical.
Right. So if we're only increasing our housing stock by 2 to 3 per year, that's where we're coming at this from. We're looking at how can we look at these strategies to say, okay, we're going to allow you to build 2 ADUs on your property and rent them both out, and maybe, that's going to then help our housing stock. It's kind of how we're trying to get at the goal. The affordable housing piece, actually, and this supports that indirectly by then being able to allow us to qualify, to meet the requirements for the 7 housing units that Nederland committed to, I mean, it kind of is all hand in hand. If we could, if we had a magic pot of money and we could say, yeah, we're going to build, 40 subsidized housing units, something like Tungsten Village, but even on steroids, that would be great. It's just not really within the realm of possibility. So we're kind of looking at what we can possibly affect through our code and regulation right now.
So it's really supply and demand.
Yes.
It will hopefully bring the price.
Well, later as we get into this, we will talk about some of the things we're doing to incentivize if we get to bullet 4, incentivize affordable housing as well. There is some incentives in there for that, which is another lift. But right now we're just trying to increase housing stock in general.
And I think base camp is hitting 7 houses in 3 years.
Right.
Well, I think we need to be clear on, we did the apartments there at the turn here and there's been several units put in down at the stream. So it's been certainly more than 2 or 3, and Kathmandu opened up. So there's been at least 10 units.
That's all rental though. It's rental.
Oh, I understand.
Yeah, mine was just, I was just speaking about new builds. That's just new build
Oh, that
permitting.
is new build.
But that hasn't been the last year that the.
Sure it
Cabinet
was.
Dude opened up. They've been renting that out for years.
No, not the upper
They sure
state.
have.
Yeah, it's over 2 years now.
Well, fine,
Yeah.
if you say so. Time flies when you're not having fun. So we're working on the first bullet though. Let's just get, so what
I just-
does a small square footage lot sound like, look like?
Sorry, before we get to that, I did want to just address
Sorry.
what Jim said. No, quite all right. I hear what you're saying, and the supply and demand is important. I think what I was trying to get at more concisely is that I think it's dangerous to start thinking about affordable and using the word affordable when you're talking about something that is not actually affordable. I like, maybe we can call it something else. I just think like it's double speak, right? And I didn't mean to take anything away from your work. I think it's going in exactly the right direction, but I do want to point that out. Affordable.
But Brett, what are we talking, what's the definition of what we need to accomplish in 3 years? Or Miranda, I bring you into it too. Or Derek.
Are you talking about for the prop one?
Yeah, what is it we need to build? What's our requirement for 3 years out? What do we have to have 7 of?
Yeah, we have to have seven affordable housing units, and I think there was a calculation based on that. I have to do some digging to figure out what that specific number is.
Okay, so this is using their definition of affordable. Okay, understood.
Okay.
Yeah, it's artificial, no
Yeah.
doubt.
Okay, just want to call out the elephant in the room.
And what's a housing unit? Seven units. So what does that look like?
What do you mean? What does it look like?
Oh, is it
What do you-
seven tiny homes on one lot?
Yeah, what are we shooting
Is it,
for?
is it a seven?
I'm not sure what the town is shooting for in regards to that. I think the language that we're presenting does make, there are developers who do develop affordable housing. I'm not sure how it works in Colorado, but I can speak from, living in a different state. There are developers that do this. They know how the funding works. And so if we're encouraging some of this affordable language, it could be seven micro houses, 7 tiny houses. I think sometimes that might be more attractive than a giant apartment complex. And so I think it looks like whatever you guys want that to look like,
Yeah, Mike, I've been working on this for the last 6 weeks, and there's some options I'm coming up with that are anywhere from a 600 to 800 square foot standalone to something that can be bolted together into townhouses. It's doable, but I'm really cognizant that number one, we're going to have community blowback, and number two, it changes the feel of a community in subtle ways and then not so subtle ways. And we have to decide. This is a longer discussion than we're going to have tonight. I just think we don't have obviously a very good definition of what's a home, what's an affordable home, but at least we kind of know what we're shooting for. And there's some guidelines that are statutory that we're gonna have to hit. I don't think we're gonna solve everything tonight. I like some of the solutions. There is a lot of innovation that's going on all over the mountain communities, coming up with some solutions. I want to keep digging into it, but I think we need to solve what we need to solve for, which is 7 units over 3 years, with the definition not clear right now.
Thanks.
Oh,
So on that note, as far as a definition, take again a rental property I have, for example, in Big Springs, standard house. I rent it out currently to a family for $2,700 a month. They're all local. I feel like I'm doing good because these guys live and work here, So if you tell me I can build a 800 square foot ADU on my rental property on my 1.2 acres or whatever I have, I'll run the numbers and try to figure out how to do that. It might cost me 250 or 300,000, but that's pretty equivalent to just buying a $300,000 condo in Boulder if I want to get another investment. So
If you can find one of those, let me know.
yeah.
$1 million.
So I guess my question is, so if I did that, would that become one of our 7 housing units? If I rented that 700 square foot ADU out for 1,500?
Well, it'd have to meet the
It'd have to meet-
30% of
Yeah.
AMI, yeah.
Yeah, it'd have to meet that defined affordable.
So it's defined by who we put into that house, right? Is that what you're saying?
No, I think there's an actual,
It's defined by how
Definition.
much you're going to rent that house for.
Understood. Okay.
And if you exceed 30% of the target resident's monthly income, then it is not affordable. It's not considered affordable.
So for my example, I'm just a standard landlord in Big Springs with a standard house, and I'm gonna build a standard 700 square foot 2-bedroom unit. What can I rent that for to meet our numbers? Sorry, if I'm
Based
missing the
on,
chart we have here.
sure, I don't know if you guys can see the chart I have up on the screen. This is the AMI, this is Boulder County's AMI table. And the numbers below it are the median household income for the town of Nederland. And if you take 30% of the take home, their gross household pay or household income, that's 30% of that, their affordable monthly housing cost is $2,506. So if you rented that at that price or lower, technically considered affordable.
And Timmy, I think that's something we can live with. If you run the
I could
numbers.
definitely rent out a 2-bedroom
You
ADU
could.
less than 2,500.
I
Yeah.
think the question, I think.
I mean, that would be, I couldn't do that with a straight face. That'd be crazy.
Yeah,
high,
I think
right?
we have some slop there. We
Yeah,
get
yeah.
anywhere from 1,600 to 2,100 is going to pencil out.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So something to keep in mind, which Derek, correct me if I'm wrong, or Attorney Master and whoever, is based on how we have this, you could deed restrict it and be open to some of those affordability components if you were going to deed restrict it to an affordable ADU unit.
Mhm.
And then that might allow you to push into setbacks and such. I'm not sure if I'm correct by saying that, but if he were to deed restrict the ADU, I don't see why you couldn't,
Mhm.
based on how this is kind of written. But then you would have to deed restrict it for, right now it says a minimum of 20 years. So you'd have to commit to 20 years of a deed restricted, but then you might be able to build further into your yard.
Mhm.
Which is bullet 4, and we're still on bullet 1.
Yes,
Well,
just something to bring
I
up
don't
since you
think we
brought up
can
that
do bullet
example.
by bullet. I'm convinced that's just.
You're running the meeting.
What was even
I know.
discussed, the smaller square lots,
Huh?
what's that look like?
I guess
Haven't
maybe
got this
in the
first
interest of time, maybe what we should do is, since you guys have been working on this very closely, maybe you ask specific input on where you know that there is a lot of controversy.
I think I go back to what Britt asked is one of the framing questions up front.
Okay.
Are there zones where we would not want to, where we would want to do this or not do this? in
Yeah,
town?
so like there's the use group table. I think it's Derek has it up right now. If you have your laptop, I'd recommend bringing it up. It's kind of hard to see, but we've separated the residential component, made its own use group table, and added alternative housing to really, right now, if you look at it, I would think I can't build a tiny house, but if it's listed there, it might encourage more of these. But we have it listed as you can build it in any zone. Is there zones that you guys feel these aren't appropriate? Do you feel maybe these alternative houses that we've named out, are there some that aren't appropriate that we can just cross off this list and really customize this use group table to fit Nederland more appropriately? Or does it fit appropriately now?
So you're talking about that table on page 35?
Correct.
Okay,
believe
it's in red.
Yes, those red, yeah, it has red font of the additions.
Okay.
38.
And I think I'd just interject that we're not necessarily talking about affordability here. It's just about housing stock. So just outlining exactly what types of housing the town would entertain or is interested in including in the housing portfolio for the town, and what zoning districts that is appropriate in from the planning commission standpoint.
So Derek, I think some of the confusion is that it's not being explained very well, that we're looking at with this new use group table, allowing potential of those other definitions, that small house, the micro home, the tiny home. Could you go over those definitions again and kind of maybe explain
Sure.
that? I think that's where we're getting stuck on what we're trying to do. So what we're trying to do is say, we're going to allow smaller houses, these smaller type housing units, and allow more density on your property if we make these changes. To try and solve some of the housing issues in our town, to try and encourage more. But I'll let you go ahead and talk about that, Derek. I don't know
Sure.
we're doing a very good job of explaining this.
It's okay. Yeah. So, and I think I'd add too, this is a menu of options right now. We don't have to include all these that are in the red. We can pick and choose. If there's some on here that you're like, that's just getting too granular. If somebody wants to build a small house, do we care if it's a tiny house, a micro house, a small house, whatever? These are just, again, it's just a menu of options to help facilitate the conversation. We do have definitions, and they should be included in your packet as well. I think I've got them down here. Yeah. So let me just get them all on one page so it's a little easier to read. But we've taken a stab at defining them too. Depending on what it gets included in the use group table, you would ultimately also need to provide an update to section 16-6, which is the definition section of the municipal code, or I'm sorry, the zoning code section of the municipal code to include these definitions. But yeah, so I mean, we all know what a duplex is. It's two buildings containing two single-family dwelling units separated, by 1 hour firewall. Same thing with the triplex. It's just 3 units, fourplex, that kind of thing. Courtyard apartments is detailed there. I can read the sentence if you want, or the multiple sentences if you want, or I can just let you kind of digest. But we've taken a stab at defining these for the community, if you choose to include them.
Okay.
So basically what it looks like, you just basically took the bulk table and upzoned the entire town by 50%. It was 4,000, now it's 2,000, it was 8,000, now it's
I'm
4,000.
not sure you're looking at the same table.
No, this is
Sorry
the
to interrupt
use
you.
group alternative. That's for affordability. This is for use group. So this is adding the addition of
Then how do you
alternative
decide where you're going to
housing.
put that?
That's what we're asking you. We're saying we have, yes, you can put it in every zone. What does the planning commission think? Are duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, apartments, townhouses, small, micro, tiny, living, are they appropriate in every zone? Where do we want to restrict them? Where do we want to have them? Are these too many alternatives? Do we just want to say tiny houses? Do we just want to say small housing unit? That's what we're really asking is, we gave you some alternative housing options. This is a code change we can make. Now, what do you guys think is appropriate for the zonage? And are these all great? You guys want to add all these additions, or do you want to say, let's simplify even the alternatives we have?
Well, in most of these cases, to allow a duplex or a triplex in, say, medium density zoning, that would have to go along with a subsequent decrease in the lot size, right? Because in most cases, like say your average medium density zoning lot is 9,000 square feet, and we need 8,000 square feet per legal building lot in medium density. So just by default, like you can't build 2 units on that. If you happen to have a medium density lot that was 16,000 square feet, then sure, build a duplex. But I think in most cases, without also changing the minimum lot size, you're not going to build a fourplex on a high density lot, right? See what I mean?
Right.
That is the problem.
So is that also what we're proposing, is corresponding with an allowed duplex, triplex, fourplex in any of these zoning districts? There would have to be a reduction in the lot size to go with that.
That's not what's included in there. What all we're talking about right now is whether or not we want to allow these additional types of housing with these definitions in here: small housing unit, micro housing unit, tiny housing units, and what zones we want to allow them to give more flexibility for the type of housing building. But it would have to meet the existing yard and bulk requirements, unless you decide to make it affordable and have it deed restricted to 30% of AMI for 20 years is what we're proposing in here. And then you would be able to cut those in half to incentivize you to build some of these other type of units. All we're talking about right now is whether or not we add these additional types of structures to increase the flexibility for people to build and then decide, okay, do we want to allow them in mountain residential? Do we want to allow it in neighborhood commercial? Do we,
Got it. That makes total sense. My point, I guess, is just, and maybe I'm wrong, but I can't imagine there's very many lots where that's even possible, where basically you would have to have an oversized lot for the zoning district, right?
Yeah, and we've got less than 50 buildable lots.
Where you could basically, you could also subdivide it, let's say. Yeah.
Theoretically, yeah.
Theoretically, yeah. Gotcha.
So maybe you need that. And it's for just specifically for that low income type housing.
So at maximum, by green lighting all these multifamily across the board in the whole town, we would at maximum allow the possibility of 50 more units. Correct?
No, it'd be
Not
more.
necessarily. I mean, I've got property over near the fire department. There's one where I've got a cabin, and theoretically with these rules, I went out with a tape measure, I could drop another. I've got a house and a cabin there now, and theoretically I could drop another one behind it.
Okay, so you're right. So you said 50 lots, so maybe that equates to 75 potential units if every lot owner maximized their ability. Right. Okay.
It's hard to grasp.
So in reality, green lighting all this, over the next 5 years might result in a handful of new units, which again is what we're after.
Well, yes and no.
Unless it's a micro unit. I mean,
There's a wild card right now where there's some legacy properties that are coming on the market. What I'm talking about, that could be a game changer.
Yep.
We're trying to solve for 100 to 120 homes. We're not going to do it with the boundaries we got now, or the buildable lots we've got right now. But again, we're trying to solve for a much smaller solution set right now.
Mm-hmm.
And just seeing if we're open to this kind of housing in this community, if it's going to be something that people could live with, or if it's destructive to the feel we want.
Sorry, I missed, what is the game changer?
There's some legacy properties that could come on the market pretty soon that are inside of town limits that aren't.
Subdivided, yeah.
Got it. Okay.
boy, we really need to keep moving on here.
Onward.
Can we at least get to the second bullet here?
Well,
Talk
I was
about
gonna
develop-
say, we didn't really, I mean, do we think that's, not do we, but
Just-
do you guys think that's appropriate? Do you think these are appropriate in every zone? Tim obviously made, the argument of the likelihood of someone being able to do all of these in their zone anyways, may not. So do we just leave it open as yes? Or are there some on here that you want to just restrict?
So again, the definitions we're looking at are small housing unit, micro housing unit, tiny housing unit, live work housing unit. We're looking at saying, should we allow these type of housing units? Is that correct? Am I getting?
Yeah, there's also I don't think we've ever had fourplex or courtyard apartment, but duplex duplex is technically, and triplex, I don't know that they're technically have ever been defined in our code. So it's everything in red is what we're addressing in this portion, which is duplex, triplex, fourplex, courtyard apartments.
What page is that on? Britt?
I'm
It's on
I'm not on there you go.
35.
Page 35.
Well, I still got to say, so now we're less confused than we were, but to take this idea, I'll just go back, just for everybody involved. The idea to take the housing study and then to say, well, it's got to be done by the end of the year, and then to put this demand on the town and the community and the individual residents and say, well, let's look at doing this and doing this up zoning almost across the board. So we got anywhere from 7 units to 150 units of upzoning. And to try to say there's a deadline and that at the next month meeting is we going to make a motion to approve, I, for one, feel that's appalling, and I totally disagree with the process. And, every issue that we've done, I mean, we spent an hour just trying to talk about a moratorium, but when we've done STRs, we've done ADUs, every time we've done this, I mean, it's taken hours and hours of discussions and reporting. And we could work all night tonight and you might be able to clarify, just in this first thing, and these 7 examples, to try to go through duplex, triplex, courtyards, and try to figure out exactly what they are and where they'd be appropriate and how they're going to do it. And then Tom brings up, well, there's a legacy property coming up. I mean, this discussion and to try to make monumental decisions about the zoning in Old Town or up the hill, where each and every time we've actually talked about this in the last 5-6 years. I mean, it's been a very, very tough thing to do. So I feel that I, for one, have worked all these years, and I will certainly continue to work and try to understand. And I'll probably call Tom tomorrow and say, please come up and explain this more in detail. But as a town, when we just took, you remember, Steve, when we took that issue of just going from 4 to 2 in Old Town at HDR.
Right.
And having that, if they would did the 8,000 square foot PDU, the entire town came out and said, this is just wrong to do. Now, I realize what we're trying to do, and I certainly understand the issues of trying to get workforce housing. Yeah, and we're all feeling that crunch, but the timeline here I find very untenable. It is for me, but I will do every effort I can. But I don't know how I'll work as hard as I can in the next month to be able to try to make a vote. But this is a tough one.
I would say the timeline has been, is something we unfortunately can't change because it's part of the grant. This has, I think, gone on before my time in this position. Derek can speak to that, but I started in January. And I will say last meeting, we brought these strategies to you guys' attention, and it felt like it was slightly pushed off to the side, that there was more important topics at the last planning commission meeting. And how can we say that we need housing? But, we find that this is, yes, I agree. Some of these are probably very drastic to see, but I think some of these are very simple changes. I mean, if you have such a strong opinion, I do think that if you're like Courtyard, that's not appropriate here and there. We've gone to the community, we've posted in the newspaper, we've posted online. I've made videos, I've had people come into my office. And so I just don't, understand why we're pushing other subjects that we find to be such an emergency, but housing it's a big opportunity. And some of these are very minor changes. And I do think, it is a short timeline, but this has been going on for this entire year. I mean, I started the housing committee when I started in January. And so it's a lot to digest. It was a lot to digest for the subcommittee. But I do think maybe some of these we don't have answers tonight, and that a lot of this might fall on the board of trustees. These are recommendations, and so maybe there's some we don't. But I do think there are some here that are obtainable tonight without a long discussion, and maybe that's just not this use group table. Maybe right now we're saying this is not appropriate for us to decide tonight. But I do think the ADU language, there's 2 in there, and then at least the affordability, that language there, it's a new addition. I think maybe those are a little bit more digestible, and maybe we just hold off on this use group table for now.
Yeah, I
Okay.
agree with that.
Move on to bullet 2.
That Oh, no, the problem with the use group table, when I look at it and green lighting everything, to me, that defeats the whole purpose of planning. I mean, it's just saying you can do whatever you want. And I guess I'd like to get down to more specifics, if at all possible. So maybe if you could highlight some of the, the small changes that you talked about that are not that, and we could plow through those fairly quickly.
Derek, feel free to go ahead and
Sure.
chat. If you want to move to ADUs after this, maybe that's
Yeah.
better
Let me just-
digestible.
Let me just interject some high level, I don't know, details about the grant and the requirements within the project. So there are two outcomes, required outcomes of the project. One is that we needed to identify at least 4 strategies to move forward with. We've technically done that. We've identified 4 strategies and we've started to drill down into what the implementation actions for those strategies looks like. The one requirement of the DOLA grant is that you have to adopt one thing. Do we think one thing is going to drastically change housing in Nederland? Probably not. That's why I think we're trying to pair that up with the 4 strategies with at least 4 implementation actions to try to move the needle a little bit faster, stronger, however you want to call it. If for some reason use group table isn't really something that's viable to get done in the next 2-3 months, okay, it's still attached to the strategy and it's still something that we can include as a recommendation in the report, in the overall housing needs assessment, and it's something that the town can take up in the future. If the residential use groups, or I'm sorry, the yard and bulk table isn't something that is attainable at this moment, okay, that's fine. But I think we should just keep in mind, like, impact versus grant requirement versus the other outcomes of the project as well. I mean, I think we're on our way. And I do agree that some of these things are harder to digest than others. And I like what Brett mentioned about moving on to the ADU table and the affordability kind of supplement, the new article that we've proposed. But I would just keep in mind impact as well. You're trying to solve a problem. If we draw it out longer, it's going to take even longer to see any benefit from the changes that we're trying to make today. So.
Well, so we're not gonna, doesn't sound like this, Jim Reese, doesn't sound like we're going to get an answer on whether or not we want to have these type of housing units in these different residential zones tonight. Let's at least try and get the information out though tonight, because we got to come back and talk. There's going to be a lot of questions. So let's talk about developing at the second bullet. Can we get to that one? The ADU piece, which will also have, I'm sure, a lot of feedback. I can find it.
Which is the bullet? So you keep saying bullets and then.
So
you
the
don't-
questions before the board, the second one says, does the PC support allowing ADUs to be constructed before primary homes?
Yeah, right there.
Does anyone
Number 2.
have an opinion on that?
I'll talk about the option of
So this.
building an ADU first before constructing a house. In real estate, I come across this idea all the time. Lots of people that are interested in building a house, just financially or just time-wise and logistically, they're like, well, what if I build an ADU and live in that and finish building and all that stuff? Sounds great and all. I think the very likely possibility in a lot of cases is they build the ADU, they're living in that, they start building the house. Halfway through building the house, they run out of money or they're way over budget and they end up living in an ADU next to an unfinished house for the next 10 years. And that's what we're dealing with.
So we do, not to cut you off, but we do have the language, because I forgot to mention this because Jim brought up the same thing as you. We do have the language that you would need to build your primary structure within 3 years. And so, because we do recognize that does happen a lot. And so I think if someone wasn't able to make that commitment, maybe that would deter from that. I don't know if that's appropriate. Would that be more appropriate,
Yeah, I
you think, in real
addressing
estate?
that commitment and getting that commitment from the person up front, rather than just having this open-ended, like, yeah, I'll just live in this little thing and start building, like, they're never gonna build.
Yeah, because we were
Debbie,
gonna have them, you would have to like pay your permit fees and get, like, everything's planned out. And so we feel like maybe if somebody was invested, like you're invested, like, 50 grand in tap fees and all this stuff. And, on top of that, your permit fees, maybe someone would be like
Right.
more willing to think it through on, can I afford to do this?
Yep.
Stuff can happen. And then from there, we deal with that as a town. But I think with all that money up front, even if they realize they can't, then at that point they sell it and give it to someone who can.
Right.
But do you think that'd be more appropriate?
Yeah, I would definitely be in support of allowing that, with the stipulation that, the concern we just talked about is addressed. And I think having some sort of commitment up front, especially financially with the tap fees or whatever.
Yeah,
I
I
think-
can, yeah, this is exactly my situation. I bought a 1930, 1920 cabin that had a piece of land. We started development. We put the $50,000 into the mailbox to get started. And there's a point at which when you're $200,000 or $300,000 into it, if you don't have the money to continue, I've got her to deal with, how are you coming on your permit?
Right.
And between the crush of complying and the crush of meeting the capital commitment, you're either going to continue or you're going to throw in the towel. And I think it's largely self-correcting. And I think what we did is what a lot of people are going to do. They're going to buy a cabin that has a buildable lot, and it's going to go backwards. There was nothing in, we had to wait for 3 years because the law didn't accommodate that at the time. But I think that's going to be one way to solve the problem that we're trying to solve for.
And one of the things, and I did want to point out, Timmy, that the language is in there where it says construction of the primary dwelling unit must occur within 3 years of the completion of the accessory dwelling unit. So this was something that I was concerned about, that somebody might, decide. And one of the things that I actually pushed back on that we talked about as a barrier to people being able to do new housing starts was maybe we should allow them to build more than one ADU. Maybe if their lot size is big enough, maybe, if they have a 2.5 acre lot or something like that, that maybe they can build a second ADU and rent that out. And so again, these are bold strategies to look at incentivizing new housing starts to try and get at this problem. Not maybe the most preferred solution if you're the neighbor, but again, we're looking at how we can solve this as a community. So mainly what this was it takes away the requirement now that you have to have your primary home constructed first before you can build an ADU. And this just reverses that. And we were also looking at the possibility of being able to rent that out while the construction was going on to help subsidize the cost of that. So maybe your contractor needs, like you said, needs a place to live while they're working on the house. Maybe it's just that you've got somebody else that you want to allow to rent that out for, $1,200 a month or whatever to help defer the cost of building your house. But again, this was just another strategy on whether or not, that is a significant change. And that's something I talked with Roger about a little bit, was that, yes, it is changing and allowing the flexibility of then, hey, maybe you can put a smaller investment together, build something that you could live in during the 3 years of construction. So that was the second question before the board.
Yeah.
Yes,
Well-
yeah, and I think they both tie into each other if that, they can. If the primary occupant doesn't have to be in that ADU, you can rent it out while it's being built. Maybe you've lived in there for 6 months and you're at that, oh man, I can't, I need some extra income, and you have family you could stay with in Boulder or somewhere else, then it gives you that opportunity to rent it out and be able to build that primary structure and then live there and rent out your ADU.
I mean, I think most people that that situation is appealing to are people that will need to live in that ADU themselves while they are building, because they just spent, they just sold their last house. They spent all the money they have on their construction loan, and they don't have a house to live in the meantime. So that's why building the ADU to live in is appealing. So.
But putting in 2 or 3 to rent out while you're living in one and building the primary resident, that's, you run the risk of basically, building a trailer park.
Well, I feel like if
Right.
you're building a new house and you are strapped for cash enough that you need to build a tiny home ADU to live in, while you build this house, you probably don't have an extra 300 grand laying around to build another ADU, right? So I think in most cases, like, unless someone's coming in with
Well,
the
Right.
specific purpose of basically building a trailer park, then I don't think it's really gonna be a.
And you
thing.
have to stay within setbacks. So most properties in Ned can't really have like 3 or 4 ADUs. I mean,
Right.
most of them probably can't even have 2 to be realistic.
And the lot coverage requirements as well.
Steve, I got to jump in. So again, here we go again. Jim, I'm sorry, but here we had a good discussion going, and then all of a sudden, without even getting close to even where we at, then you bring up, well, then let's do 2 or 3. So let's try to get through the one thing, you know. So is the not living there, is that just a temporary situation, or is that long-term? So see that we've had almost 3 jumps on the discussion. So the idea of not having to have the landowner live on the property, is that just a temporary thing till it's built, or that's long-term?
Well, I don't think that applies really to the situation where, so I'm building a house, I build an ADU in the meantime. Like, if I need to rent that out to somebody while I live somewhere else, like I might as well just finish the house so I have a place to live.
Well, I understand. So that's temporary well, as opposed to the way, when I read the ordinance, was the idea that because that was a huge part of the ADU, is that the primary owner of the building had to live there. If it's a temporary while the place is being built, that's totally different, and that's easy to agree to.
Right.
But the idea of saying now it's 2 units or 3 units or 4 units is a totally different discussion as far as zoning goes.
Right.
Well, I'm sorry I brought that up,
So
but just hold on a second. So the deal was that would be a possibility within size requirements if, as this was an option that was talked about. But the main thing by not making it, again, the goal, I'm gonna go back to this again, to increase housing units for people to live in Nederland. So if we have an ADU and it's built there and it's rented out to somebody who's not the person who's building the house, that gets to the goal. Maybe the person that is going to work the 7th day over there at the diner bar will be able to rent that ADU while the construction of that house is being done, and it'll have offset that. We're not trying to say exactly how you're going to use the ADU. We're just trying to spur and incentivize the opportunity for new housing starts. And if having an ADU being able to be built before your primary house allows that to happen, even whether you live in it, the construction guy lives in it, or the guy who works down at the diner bar lives in it, it doesn't really matter. We're increasing the housing stock in Nederland.
Yeah, and we can,
I agree 100% with that, Jim, but the answer is that permanent, long-term?
we can take, so
Yes.
how the draft was written is, yes, the primary owner wouldn't have to live there, but that can be taken out. That was just something we were playing around with
I
and
did not
seeing.
hear what you said, would not.
It would not have to, but that is, we can take that out. The main focus is, can the ADU be constructed for the primary home? That language with the owner can be put back.
Absolutely, I'm in agreement with that. If we would have just, yes, I'm in
Yeah.
agreement. I understand. That's not a bad idea. In fact, I'm shocked that it's not allowed. I felt like the intent, there was never an intent to stop that. So I will go back and review that. I will have one caveat I would ask that if we allow that at the time which we worked on this, it went through, and then at the last minute, one of the board members actually changed the setbacks on the ADU to make that be only an accessory setback. And I felt actually, most of us did, but the DOT changed it, that the accessory dwelling unit does not have to meet, because it's a resident, so it could be the same setback as a shed or something else on a property line. So I would, I realize it's a little off the table, but we're talking about ADUs and making changes. That's one change I've always felt that would be appropriate, that it is a dwelling space, so it should actually meet the setbacks of, primary building, because it is a residence, as opposed to a shed. But, I might be a minority of that, but I at least throw that out, that would be a caveat for a win-win. But yeah, the idea, that makes no difference whether you're building the ADU or the real, for me, but whether or not a primary homeowner lives there, I mean, that is a big difference. And to answer your question, Jim, is that a building unit is a building unit. So really, as was actually spoken of earlier, no matter who's living in it, it doesn't matter. It is a dwelling unit. So to say it's win-win, I don't know. It's a dwelling unit. And no matter which way you cut it. So I said enough.
I was going to say, I think it would be appropriate to, if all the commissioners feel this way, it'd be appropriate to move with construction before primary homes for the ADUs. But for now, we'll just remove the language with the primary owner part, because I think that does require more discussion. So I
Yeah.
do think it's appropriate to hold off and maybe talk about that in the future, but not anytime soon. But I'd like to hear from other commissioners if they also feel, the same as some of you have spoken up. Is it appropriate to build that ADU before the primary structure, given the language that we've put, you need to build that primary structure within 3 years?
It's probably appropriate to ask for a nod and see where we're at.
Could I ask real quick? I think I'm in support of it, but do we know any of the history of why it's disallowed other than the scenario that
No.
you mentioned?
We don't, we have, there's really
Yeah.
not, it's kind of silly.
I
Yeah.
think it might be related to, like, you build this basically ADU before we had any regulations for ADUs.
Yeah,
Then you build a real house, then you have this unregulated ADU
Right.
right.
with a kitchen and a bath and everything,
Okay.
you know what I mean?
That'd be horrible.
Not,
Yeah.
not that that's
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah, yeah.
It is.
Yeah, okay, good, thanks.
I think,
Okay,
I
well, let's
think
just
some,
finish up the ADU, then we're gonna take a quick break and we're gonna figure out how we should proceed, because we're not really,
Process.
yes, the process. Okay, so in answer to your question, Britt, as far as the ADU before the house, we could just get a nod. I like your idea of having a nod, that I think that's probably good without all the detail. Now, is it just one or several ADUs?
If you guys are really not about the more than one unit, then again, we'll just proceed forward with only the language that the ADU can be built before the primary structure, given that 3-year timeline.
Yeah.
If that's the most appropriate, let me get a nod. And if Commissioner Herring and Rivera just want to give a yes or no.
Yes, thank you.
Okay,
This is Stephanie.
perfect.
Good.
So is the consensus to take out A and E? We're going to leave those as is?
Yeah, we're
Or
gonna
just-
take out that primary language, and take out the more than one ADU, I think
Okay.
is
So
what
those-
I'm getting
those will not be struck.
correct.
Okay, and then we'll just include this as an addition, the timing and the construction requirement.
Yes.
Good.
Okay,
We agreed on something. That's great.
no, I hate to stop this momentum, but
I do think we have, after the break, we have 1 or 2 items we could actually get through that are very quick, simple,
That's
to
what I
the
was
point.
thinking,
I
the
do think we have
15%.
2, and then, the 15%, and I think the affordability
right,
could be appropriate, and then,
Can we take the simplest one before the break so we can have 2 done?
okay.
the 15, how do you guys feel about that 15% variance from administrative?
Let's wait for Jim. Let's just take a break and then we'll come back and do it.
All right.
5 minutes. Everyone in agreement?
Hey everyone, we can't hear you if you're muted right now.
I'm sorry, that was my fault. Yeah, so a lot of towns, they're like Boulder County, for instance, allows 20%. We don't want to go for anything crazy here. It really is just, we're looking at those instances when a lot size is just right there. And it's just really, it really is not fair for this person to have to wait until we can get all the BZA together. You know, there are sensitive issues. If it's a really sensitive setback and like Jim was saying, and we're like, that maybe this is too controversial. We think we should go ahead and push this, and we will push it to the BZA. I think you should trust your town staff for that. So this is just asking for 15%. That's a workable number. It's appropriate based on other towns I've looked at. We didn't shoot for the 20% that we see some towns at. And you know, some towns are at 10%, but they go based on, some towns go, like Erie, for instance, goes based on whatever the variance might be. It might be this one, they do 10, this do 15. Blanket is, as we see, when you get more black and white, it's a blanket statement. Trust your town staff. We are gonna do what's appropriate by means, if allowed.
Yeah. Would part of the process be the town staff contacting the neighbors of the property in question?
No, not as it's written now. It would just be town staff looks at it. If it's deemed appropriate,
Okay.
they would go ahead and make the approval. So we wouldn't be reaching out to neighbors or things like that. But I think Miranda knows the town well enough, while, you know, to know if it might be a controversial area. Since she's going to be the one making these decisions, I would really just be that backup support, and it might be her and I working as a team.
And if it was controversial, if a setback encroached or something,
Exactly. Correct. Yes.
then it would be kicked to the BZA.
Yeah, I like
thank
the
you.
idea that it's not hardwired, or that you do have that flexibility. So let's, unless there's another question, maybe we can get a nod.
Yeah. Do we have a nod that feels appropriate, or does someone feel like that's not appropriate? Maybe we need to look at something else. Not that it's appropriate. And
We'll need to
Commissioner
get-
Herring and Rivera, do you guys feel that's appropriate? It was for a 15% administrative variance, up to 15% approval. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah.
Sorry. I'm just trying to make sure I understand what that actually means.
Yes,
Practice.
Yeah, me too.
so Miranda would be the person, and her designee, which would probably be me. We would have administrative, up to 15%, we could administratively approve a yard and bulk variance. So that might be lot size, setback, basically nothing with height. If we felt something was going to be controversial and it's not something we would maybe want to take that administrative stance on, then we would go ahead and push it through to the BZA.
And the idea that we were looking at with that was that the sizes we were talking about were small. So again, I use the example of a 30-foot setback in mountain residential, and then the variance might be, they could approve up to a 4.5-foot incursion onto that 30-foot setback, you know, and so, you know, based on the appropriateness of the build, where it is in relationship. And essentially all we're doing is we're saying, we're going to trust the staff to make this kind of decision without kicking it all the way over for a full BZA vote, because it's such a small amount. We don't want to hold up the process. Am I explaining that correctly?
Yeah, and I will say, as town staff, at least this is my approach when I get a building permit, is we're really looking for it when it comes to these minor lot sizes where someone's 60 feet from hitting that lot size and now they're having to go through this process. When it comes to setbacks, I really encourage residents to try to stay within your setbacks. I'm not one to typically say, build within, you know, build outside of your setbacks. We're really encouraging them to stay within their setbacks. So just to give you some peace of mind, a lot of the original thought process was, let's let these people build their lots without having to get, you know, go through all this time just to have 2 seconds of the BZA to go, yep, appropriate, good to go. So it's really just pushing forward to give us that ability to do that.
Now with that discussion, I had to add something to it then. So, I mean, the real issue is that I mean, they need, well, I think you would need to follow the criteria of the BZA. So, I mean, they can't just say, oh, our house would have a better view if we're 4 feet over here. You know, it's got to be the criteria of the BZA, you know, why they would need a variance.
Correct.
Obviously, the size of the lot, that comes in 10 or 20 or 50 feet,
Yeah.
square feet short. That's it. That's a no-brainer. But the other idea is that, oh, I would just like to move my house.
Yeah, because it is a variance,
There
it
is the
would,
criteria.
yeah, it
that
would
you
be,
follow.
we would be looking at it from that same criteria.
Town staff would look at the same
I
criteria.
understand,
correct?
right? They always do.
Correct.
I'm sorry, I used a bad example there.
No, but yeah, that's a great question. We would be looking at the same criteria as the BZA. We wouldn't just look at it and be like, oh, this looks good. I know Tom, I'll just let him do it. We wouldn't be doing that. We would look at the criteria and is this really
would like to do-
appropriate? Could you work within the setbacks? And if they can work within the setbacks, we always say, work within the setbacks, or we do push them to the BZA.
Right.
So Chris and Stephanie, is that clear? Does that help?
I think the only question I have is, I think that the town staff has a good understanding, but are we talking about amending and adding that language into the town code so that everyone understands that? Or the only reason why I say that, okay, we are.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, so we would be looking to add it to our town code, so, that would be just clear across the board. It wouldn't be something that we're just
Okay.
telling people we allow now.
And my ask
Okay.
on this one, in this discussion was that when they do take this privilege, that they notify us at the next board meeting that they took this action.
Yes, so this is something we would probably put like in our staff reports or, to let kind of you guys know and the board of trustees know that this variance was made. We do want to make sure you're appropriately notified.
Yeah, I think as long as it's documented and posted in the code, and then the judgment is well, translated in next meetings, I think that all that I'm good with that.
So if we have our nods. Whoops.
Sorry,
Stephanie?
I had one question. I had one follow-up question. In general, with a lot of these variances, what's the requirement for notifying neighbors? Is there one?
Yes, there is. Typically, we have letters sent within 300 feet of the property. And typically, I will say, at least just the BZAs that I've been to, when it comes to some of these decisions that we're looking at, like the lot sizes and things like that, we don't find that many people come and attend. We've had support, but that's about it. But anything that, Miranda might find, you know what, this looks too controversial, she's looking to push to the BZA as well. But right now, we don't have any language about that we would notify the neighbors. I don't believe so anyways. No, Derek is shaking.
But if they went to the BZA, then the neighbors would have to be notified.
Correct, yes.
Okay. Yeah, well, I appreciate that in most cases it probably isn't that big of a concern. And I've never been to one of those BZA discussions before, so I'm not really sure how they how they proceed.
They're on YouTube,
usually-
Stephanie, if you ever want to see them.
So on my free time, I'll make sure I catch up on those.
I think the main issue, Stephanie, that Miranda was trying to say was this is such a small, we'll try a different thing instead of setback. Let's say the lot size was 1,000 feet, that it was the requirement. The 15% would give them the ability, to 150 additional square footage coverage on that. And so basically how they were saying was it's such a small amount that we're asking for it. And maybe 15% is too much in your mind, but they're saying, hey, let's trust the staff that we're going to make a good decision based on everything we know, the application, the neighbors, our knowledge, and we're not going to put anybody, in a bad situation. We're not going to allow somebody to build right up next door to somebody else. We're not going to do that kind of thing. They're just basically asking for a vote of trust of the staff to be able to move some of these things along where it's a simple adjustment within 15%.
Yeah, and in general, I certainly support that piece of it. What I want to be sure of is that, we're not, that for neighbors that when we're going to do something that's a variance on the code that we have, right? There's a reason we have a public process for that. And so I just want to ensure that we're respecting any potential impacts that these might have on neighbors, even if 99% of the time they're not commenting on them. Again, if it's one of those situations where if the staff feels like it might be controversial, we'll kick to the BZA and there would be a public notice. Perhaps that's sufficient. But I'm cognizant of that. I think that it's important to make sure neighbors understand what's happening next to them.
I think that's appropriate. And I think maybe, once, if this is drafted and the Board of Trustees found this appropriate, I would say, I don't know if I know not everyone pays attention to it, but the meetings are publicly noticed. And if we are putting these in our reports or putting these in our meetings to notify the Planning Commission and the Board of Trustees, maybe it's something just administratively, we're letting people know these are being publicly posted in the meetings. We are notifying commissioners and Board of Trustees members that this is. And so if the people of the community who are active in these meetings, I'd say would see that, but I do understand not everyone has time for that as well.
Okay.
Do we want to move on to the next?
Yeah, let's see if we can do one more.
Okay,
We're gonna have
perfect.
to
So the last one that I would really like to chat about is this new affordable code language in there, which is labeled as new article X I don't Roman numerals affordable housing development supplement. So really just looking at that language and do you guys feel that this is, I guess, appropriate, really creating an affordable supplement? I don't go based off the PC packet. I go from here. I'm not sure what page, so give me a second.
No wonder I'm confused.
So just looking, we're just looking once you get there, sorry. We're just looking for, do you feel this is like a appropriate addition to our code to really entice developers possibly affordable developers to move within Nederland?
Yeah, I think what we're trying to do with this new article is outline what affordability means for the town and then set up a space that you could put those incentives. So if in the future, say 5 years from now, you're like, hey, let's try a density bonus as something, but it has to be affordable and it has to be deed restricted. This is where that piece would go. So we're just trying to outline, what eligibility means in terms of affordability and how the deed restriction process might work.
I think some of these are good ideas. My only concern is the definition of an affordable housing development is just 10%. So if I make $10 million townhomes and only sell one of them or rent one of them as affordable, then I can get a 50% variance on all my yard and bulk and all these other benefits. That seems extremely generous. So that's my concern with that. Although these ideas in general are good, but not for a 90% not affordable development.
And Derek, could you address this a little bit? I think we talked about this, and unfortunately, it's not in this packet, but he sent me a bunch of information for different strategies that are being done around the state. Eagle, Colorado, I think was the town that most of those were done. And I think the percentage of 10% was pretty standard for, let's say, if a planned unit development was done or somebody built, apartment complex or a couple of quadplexes, that 10%. But I'll let Derek talk to that a little bit. But where did that 10% come from, buddy?
10% seems pretty standard. in terms of defining eligibility for a housing development. But you're right. Yeah, I mean, a developer could come in with $10 million units and only set aside one. I've seen some communities go up to 30%. I've seen some communities deal with this with an inclusionary zoning ordinance where they're requiring and saying, you know, sure, show us your development proposal, but you know, if you want to build here, you got to do 30% of your units, your proposed units as affordable. Those typically end up being, you know, I mean, in order for them to make it pencil in, right, they've got to sell a portion of them at market rate typically. There are very few developers, I think, in the state right now that are doing 100% affordable units, and usually those are coupled with a lot of state and federal grants in terms of, you know, low-income housing tax credits and other subsidies that the communities are able to provide. 10% felt like an entry point. You know, I'm not sure if somebody would come in with 10 townhomes. I think they're going to have to jump through a lot of hoops anyway to get 10 approved, depending on the zoning district that they're proposing in. But you know, what if it's a small apartment complex that's 10 units? Maybe that changes things.
Or it's a fourplex and one of the four is affordable.
Right. Yeah.
That's what, yeah.
So again, it's a little bit of that balancing of inducing housing development period and trying to incentivize a little bit of that being affordable, or, you know, air quotes, affordable.
I will say, based on some of that knowledge or that info that you sent me, initially we talked about having it be a deed restriction of 10 years. And I asked, you know, for a little bit of feedback on that and felt like that seemed like a lot to give up for just 10 years. And then you can now rent that with full market rate. And some of the info that was passed on, that it's anywhere from 10 to 60 years is kind of the range that they do these deed restrictions. And so we kind of just came up with 20%. And again, this is all based on, we want to get discussion and feedback here, but you know, Tom and I and the group agreed that 20 years would be a good amount of time to have affordable. And again, this is the affordable housing piece, which means it's 30% of AMI as opposed to, you know, what the market rate is. So these were just some strategies we're talking about, trying to encourage affordable housing. So like you said, I think it would be great if somebody built a fourplex and one of the four, or they built two fourplexes, you know, and one of them was affordable for 20 years, you know.
So can I ask a question? So the page 39 corresponds with the table on 38? I mean, the yard and bulk. Yes.
So yeah, so
But they
that-
mentioned 50% reduction.
yeah, so that was
How
like
responds to this?
that was like
yard-
kind of a two-part question. I wasn't going to get into it because I didn't know if it'd be a bigger discussion item. But yeah, that was like the second piece of this affordability. Isn't the use group table was for visuals only, but it was saying we create a strong, town staff was recommended, we create a strong language that says this affordable developer has up to 50%. And so this really creates kind of the talk back and forth of, can you do it in 20%? I can do it in 30%. And so we're not really encouraging everyone goes for that 50%. That was kind of part two of it. I didn't know if that was appropriate to talk about the way this meeting has been going. But if that's an easy discussion item to bring along with the affordability, that's completely fine.
Well, yeah, it's so easy. I mean, so yes, it was easy to talk about, you know, the affordable housing development supplement and, you know, and having the years and 20% or 10%. But then the yard and bulk is where you know, the tires hit the pavement. So yes, you need to, you know, you really can't approve one without the other. It would
You could decouple the definition of what the town's going to move forward with in terms of affordability and deed restriction from any action at this time.
Well,
You could set up the precedent and say, we're going to determine what makes sense.
well,
from
for me, just to say, then I'll be done, would be that, yeah, the article and the wording and that inspiration is great, and we need to work on, is exactly what 1633 yard and bulk will look like. So, yeah, I have no problem with it, the idea.
You look just like that.
Well, I understand. I would,
Yeah, I think,
well, how do you approve it? Looking around town and approving that is totally different from the overview of, yes, we want to try to set this as a goal. I understand, but that would take a lot of discussion and some study to see, are you?
we wouldn't want to create a table specifically for affordability. We would just want to create strong language that states if you are eligible, you're deemed by the town to be eligible to provide affordable housing, you can have up to 50%. That requires discussion, that requires like public hearing. I mean, that requires so much for this individual to do that. That's not just a town administrative thing. We wouldn't say, okay, you can do it in 30, you've got it. No, that would require a big discussion. And so the table was just to visually show you that, but we don't want to have that table because as a developer, you're going to look at that and say, well, I'm shooting for 50% of that lot size. We don't want to necessarily encourage that. We want to encourage, yes, you can build up to 50%, but you still have to go through this whole process. I mean, they still have to come to you. They still have to go to the Board of Trustees. There's going to be a lot of public comment. And so, I do think we have a good base here. I do think some of the language is good, but we're really open to feedback on it. Looking at this, piece that Derek has really created here, is there items in there like you don't find appropriate? Do you think that 50% sounds like too much? Like we are very open to just looking at this. Is that kind of scary to you?
Kind of back to what I was saying earlier. I'd be fine with allowing the up to 50% variance on all the setbacks and everything, but the scary thing for me is the 50% variance on the minimum lot size. I mean, that's effectively changing zoning. That's like a whole other thing. So again, back to my admittedly extreme example of my $10 million townhomes, like what, now I can make 20 if only 2 of them are affordable? Like, sign me up, I'll do that, right?
Do you think there's a more appropriate
process?
Yeah, no, I was gonna say, do you think there's a more because we just shot for like I'm not gonna lie, we shot for a big amount and said, let's see what they have to say. Does 35% make more sense? Does even less than that make more sense?
I mean, as far as the lot size, 15%, like our previous topic.
Okay, and then like setbacks would be more.
I would be fine with that, and setbacks, sure, 50%.
Okay.
Like, I don't care if it's 25 feet from the line versus 50, but
Yeah.
20 units versus 10, that's a big deal, right?
Okay, that's work. Yeah. Does anyone else have some comments on that?
I very much agree with what you're saying there, and I
Okay.
think that the 10% of the total dwelling units is too low. I think something like even 30 to 50%.
Okay.
I'm
So
concerned
again, you
that-
have to be realistic about what is going to actually,
I know.
and if you then say, we're going to take 50% of your units, maybe they're not going to invest $5 million in this housing complex. They can't make it back.
Oh, no, I don't know the right number either. But
No, I think it's good
10%
to
is-
throw these numbers out and then
Yeah.
as a subcommittee, we can go back and say, is this appropriate thing to even keep pushing forward with right now?
And
Unfortunately.
the 10% will attract predator.
Well, we might have to have like one more meeting just to.
Yeah, at least.
Well, you expect to have another meeting.
Well, I think this, for me, just the clarification, this has been this part, and that just in this one example, this one area is very, very healthy and, a good thing. It's a discussion. So thanks. I'm getting there.
Okay.
While I'm at
appreciate
it, referencing my point earlier about the elephant in the room, I think instead of 100%, perhaps we should consider lowering that to 80 of the AMI in terms of our definition of affordable.
Well, the affordable definition is 30% of AMI.
Sorry. So I'm looking at 16 and 323, number A, where it says,
What page is that, brother?
it is page 39. So a housing development is considered affordable if at least 10% of the total dwelling units are affordable to rent and earning 100% or less of the area at the AMI. I was suggesting dropping that from 100% of the AMI to 80%.
But Brett, isn't this come from statute? Isn't this what we need to hit?
I'm gonna look at Derek for that one.
Okay.
I
I'm
wonder
not
if that's a
100%
typo,
sure.
because if you look up ahead, above that where it says affordable housing under definition, it says that it does not exceed 30% of the household's gross monthly income. So I wonder if that is just we didn't.
Well, 100% of AMI and 30% of the gross income are two different
Okay.
line items, right?
Right.
Yep.
All right, Derek, help us figure this out. We're on page 39. We're looking at 16.
Okay, so you're, yeah, you're looking,
323 eligibility.
He's muted, I think.
Apologies, I was. Can you guys see my screen by chance? I have a simple
yes,
graphic up here. So this
got
is
it.
where that piece comes from. So you're looking at the AMI table. If we're targeting 100% or less AMI, you're looking at a household income, a two-person household income, because the typical household makeup in Nederland right now is like something like 2.23 or something. If you're targeting 100% or lower, you'd start at the top and say, okay, if it's a two-person household and they're making 100% of AMI, you're shooting for 30% of that number. So $100,400 annual income. Okay, if we drop that to 80%, you're shooting for 30% of $72,000. So you're going to get deeper affordability, but you might decrease the ability of a developer to provide that housing.
Yeah, Timmy, do you think you could do, I mean, could you build if the 860 equates to 220 of income, what do you build for somebody who makes $70,000?
Yeah.
I guess was the question.
It's tough. I mean, building prices at 400 a square foot at least right now. I mean,
Yeah,
it's tough to build anything remotely affordable.
I think we're kind of boxing ourselves into something that isn't going to work. And I think we're in some ways tying our hands, but I don't vote.
And I think too that comes into play when you couple that with market rate housing. So if you allow 10 units, and yes, 9 of them are market rate, but that allows the developer to provide that 1 unit for you know, an affordable range, then we're getting closer to the mark that we're trying to hit.
Agreed.
So that's leaving it at 100? Is that right? Leaving that number at 100? 100%?
My recommendation would be to leave it at 100% or lower.
Mm-hmm.
The top end threshold, I think, should be at max 100. I am seeing more and more communities around the state eke up toward the 120%.
Could you live with 100, Mike?
I don't know. I'm not sure that I can. I mean, I'm not a developer. I understand your point that it may be unrealistic to ask for lower. It may deter everybody. But at the same time, if I don't have a whole lot of trust in developers, the ones that I've seen come into the town they take advantage of every corner they can cut with, you know, very few exceptions. And I think they're going to build as an expensive or as cheap a unit as they can, as a rule, and rent it out for as much as they can. And I'm not sure this is going to actually help the problem. So I understand the supply and demand, and that the goal here is not to build like cheap, low-income housing, but to address the supply and demand issue. My perception is that the market is so saturated and there's so much demand that building another 5 or 7 units in the next 3 years, it's a drop in the bucket. I'm skeptical of whether that will have any impact, not to be, a Debbie Downer, but that's true, but I'm not sure that it's not going to be the people that really need the help. I mean, there'll be, high-end tech people. I'm one of them, perhaps, but the town needs housing for workforce housing for the stores and people to run the stores and some of the people that own the stores. And I don't mean to discredit your effort.
Yeah, there's
It's
laws of
hard to-
physics, and what Timmy is talking about at 400 a square foot is, given all the lumber that's being diverted down to the front range right now and the workers and everything else, we could say something, but if it can't be done, we're shouting in the woods. It doesn't make any difference.
Yep.
I think we need to do something that's at least borderline achievable, even a reach.
Yep.
Or we're gonna be totally stuck. And I think 7
I hear you.
is base camp. That's 8% of what we really need.
Yep.
Well, question, maybe that I shouldn't be questioning, but thinking from the point of, always talking with Attorney Madison, things can be amended over time. Maybe when prices, if they ever came down, maybe we could more reasonably look at this, amending it in the future. Again, the likelihood, I don't know, but just thinking from the aside, thinking aside, everything can be amended at some point. Just a thought. I'm not saying let's move forward with this, but could it be readdressed again in the future if something like this were to pass and we were to move this into our code? Realistically, yes, we could change numbers.
So it's sounding more like we're only having consensus on 2 of the questions before the board right now. Am I getting that wrong?
2?
Yeah. Didn't we say that we
We're
were
on
in
t-
agreement with the ADU
Yeah,
and the 15%?
yeah.
Right.
And so there's at least 2,
Well,
We
which is
need
good.
4.
well, I want to hear from Stephanie and Chris on this one.
I'm good with both of those.
That's the 10% and the 100%. Which one, what are you talking about?
Yeah, the 10%.
Okay. Stephanie?
Yeah, some of this, I mean, I think is a bit theoretical for me. I mean, I agree with Jimmy's point about, expanding this too much effectively is changing zoning, which I think is a whole different kind of extent of the conversation. I think at this level, it sounds manageable. How about reading through every scenario? No. So, but at a high level, yeah, I think I can support that. The 100% one, I mean, I see the point of trying to lower that. I think that I mean, on the one hand, yes, I think we should do something. I guess I'm also in the boat of skeptical as to how much this will really move the needle. But I think we need something. So I can support both of those.
Okay,
Steve, I got a question.
sure.
So what would be the process that we would go forward on this? Would this be a PUD special review? I mean, because it's more than likely going to be several units. It's probably not going to be used by right.
No, anything affordable, if it was eligible, would all be deed restricted for that 20-year timeline.
But what would be the process to approve it? Special review or PUD? What's
Yeah.
the hearing
One
process?
of the 2, depending.
Yeah, I think it
Big
would be similar to, I think it would be like a PUD. I'm not 100% sure.
Well, then, yeah, I would just suggest that we need to think about that and put that, that in there so it's clarified that it would, whatever the review process would be. I have to go back and look at the table, just say, but I mean, right now, anything over, say, 4 units is reviewed.
Well, Yeah, I would think it'd have to be at least 4 units. Like you were saying, you'd have a fourplex and one would be affordable.
So,
So it was.
so short of changing the code and changing that part of the code, which actually that was one of the things here, that was another, one of the bullets was to talk about the 4. And then I was a little confused on what that was, there was the 4 units on, one of the,
You mean the tables?
yeah, one of the table, the yard, whichever one it was, but that was another one of your changes or amendments. But anyhow, okay, but move on for that. So on where we are right now, that answers the question.
Okay.
So I think it's appropriate to probably say we're comfortable moving forward on that 15%, comfortable moving on the ADU building before the structure. We've identified these other strategies, but maybe it's something that's more of a long-term discussion. But let's keep it rolling just because it goes to the Board of Trustees. I do still think it's something that even if they come to the same conclusion, we should still keep moving on some of this. Some of this is something we've identified as a strategy now, and, we'll see what the Board of Trustees has to say about it, but this will come back to you next
Well, I was
meeting.
going to say, we have time to think about it.
Yes, correct.
I think you have enough input to go forth with the draft.
Correct.
We'll see it again. We can always tweak it a little bit if we need to, and
Yeah.
then of course go to the board and they'll make the final. They may even tweak it
Even more.
a lot.
Yeah, I mean, these 2 changes make it appropriate to then be okay, like the grant they make
Right.
the conditions of the grant moving forward with these 2 changes.
Yeah,
Would be
especially what
appropriate.
Derek said earlier about, one.
We just need 1.
Just
2 is
need one.
great.
I mean, that, I
Two's
know
great.
that.
So,
So just before we get off of this, I thought we had consensus, or maybe we didn't, maybe I missed some. Did we have consensus that 10% of the units would constitute meeting the requirement for affordable housing if that was designated? We were talking about the criteria. And if that's the case, then maybe, and we do away with the yard and bulk piece of it, where we were recommending up to 50% variance, based on affordability. But if that piece is out, is the 10%, is that something that we are in agreement because then we can move forward with that as well, saying that if 10% of your units, are designated affordable, or are we not in agreement with that?
What does that trigger?
Oh,
yeah, I was gonna say
yes.
it's triggering, and plus it's really not, there's nothing to entice someone to develop develop affordable unit anymore. There's no enticement, I would say, from this, because we're not offering any fees or anything like that right now. It's not something the town's comfortable doing. So yeah, there would be no enticement. So I don't know that this would make sense to move forward, but it sounds like we've got a great foundation to maybe work forward after to keep continuing on between. Maybe the Board of Trustees will bring this back to us or something, who knows?
On that topic, the 2 things that I think need a lot more consideration are the 10% number that triggers all these allowable variances or whatever. Do we want that 10? Do we want that 25? I don't know. I don't know if 10 is the right answer. And then the other thing that's really scary is on the yard and bulk, the 50% variance for the lot size. I think that's huge.
Too much.
Yeah. But something like 15%, I think that would be fine. But for that particular line item, i.e. lot size, I think 50%, I mean, that's way too much. That potentially changes everything,
Yeah, you're right next to each other.
Yeah. Because then again, like I can, instead of doing $10 million townhomes, I can do 20 and have 2 of them be affordable.
Right.
I mean, that's extreme, but that's what this would allow effectively.
Exactly. Short of saying, just short of saying that here's specific areas where you could do that, where, it's through a comprehensive plan process or something, pointing, saying here's an area that would be higher density. But that's a whole nother process to try to figure this out, as opposed to someone just saying, hey, I'm going to be on, whatever, I shouldn't even say, Okay, I won't even pick out a street, but just to say, you know, I bought this property and bingo, I want to do that. That's just going to be a tough one for the neighborhood. You're exactly right, unless we have the stuff planned beforehand, exactly what to expect and how to expect it. But that's,
Yeah.
I mean, I wish all this was happening with the comprehensive plan. You know, where, you know, I actually worked and tried to push that 10 years ago, that if we were going to do higher density, we need to start there with the comprehensive plan and point out areas where things like this could happen. And, you know, we did zero land
Yeah.
use.
Well, I think that's a good point you bring up is, you know, we've identified two at least. That's great. So maybe some of these other items are something that we bring up during this comprehensive plan study, or, you know, bring it up. Let's focus on some affordable housing because we all know it's going to come up. Now we have this strategy. It just needs to maybe be a little bit more cleaned up, you know, based on public feedback. And so I think this, at least identifying this strategy, will now give us something to work with that comp plan. And since the comp plan's coming, it can roll and we're not going to lose momentum on this.
That's where we struggled tonight, looking at the table first. And green lighting everything, that's
Right.
what threw red flags up. And
Well, obviously for me, the fact that just trying to read the packet and make heads or tails out of it, you know, now I at least understand a little more what the
Okay.
committee was trying to get at. Yes, absolutely.
okay. Well, let's go forward then with the draft ordinance based on the input we've had. We'll have another chance to take a look at it and give it some more thought and so forth. Especially the wording.
I know you're gonna love me for this. Is there any chance of even fitting in another meeting, a work session, just for this subject? I mean, my thought is that I would hate to, well, just as a little bit of confusion and all the questions we have, and really, we've only gone through about half the discussion, I think, about 50% of the different bullets.
Well, I think what we're going to do is, I think that what we're trying to do, because of the time frame requirements, were we got to advance something to meet the grant requirements. So some of these other things that are going to require additional discussion, we could come back to at another time, but we at least need to advance these two
Fine.
that we're in
We're just
agreement.
not going to put them all in
Further-
Yeah.
I got you.
Yeah.
That's helpful, but okay.
at this time.
You know, what I was trying to say is, you know, as opposed to having to make a decision, that's fine. I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
I would be willing to meet again. I love you guys.
You could take my place on the subcommittee.
Okay, well, let's move on.
Chair Williams, this
Yes.
is Attorney Madsen. I don't know if there's anybody in the room, but I didn't hear any call for public comment. Maybe there was.
Good
The-
point.
Yeah, well, there's no one in the room, so I didn't call for it. And I didn't see anyone online. Oh, is she? Oh. Wendy, did you, were you trying to make or want to make a comment, public comment on this particular item?
Muted.
Muted.
The chat says no comment on this item.
Okay. All right.
Sorry, no comment on that item.
Okay, thank you. Okay, municipal code edition for parking. You going to introduce this
That's-
one as well?
I was gonna say that's the old packet, but if we want to do that instead of, we technically have animals and then that.
Okay,
Parking, parking might be faster. I don't know. Animals would probably be fast unless anyone has like more opinions really. Would you like me to start with animals or parking? Do you have a preference?
let's do parking.
Okay. Parking. So over the years, the Board of Trustees and Planning Commission has had discussion for parking throughout town, including the development of paid parking on town-owned lots. The town budgeted in 2023 for paid parking and identified it as a revenue goal in the strategic plan to stabilize, plan, grow revenue until December 2024. While staff are eager to move forward with the paid parking now, the visitor center, now that the visitor center lot has been paved, it is recommended by the town attorney that town develop code language that both allows parking as a use and provides the language that creates uniformity as it relates to paid parking. So there's consistency in the I can never pronounce this word. I don't know why. Anyways, I fumble it. Use group. It's recommended that the town add parking to the use group table. By doing so, town can identify the zones where the parking lots and or paid parking would be allowed. Paid parking. The town, as well as private property owners, have expressed interest in pursuing paid parking to create some uniformity in terms of how each party approaches the implementation of paid parking. It is recommended that language regarding paid parking be added to Nederland Municipal Code that outlines the requirements for paid parking. Examples of code language might be what type of paid parking systems are allowed, kiosk versus QR codes, or how enforcement is handled. Town recommendations. At the September 19th, 2023 Board of Trustee meeting, town staff recommended that the PC work on these code amendments. It was noted that since the PC oversees Chapter 16 of the Nederland Municipal Code, which is where the use group table is housed, and there was a subcommittee already formed by the PC on parking, the PC is the most appropriate board to work on this group table amendment and recommended code language for paid parking. Town staff is requesting that Chair Reese and Commissioner Glasser serve on the subcommittee with staff since they were the original board members who served on the parking in the Nederland PC subcommittee. We feel that we can move relatively quickly with the code changes and the time commitment will be very minimum. So our questions before the board is, does the PC have any concerns with working on draft recommended code language for paid parking as well as that use group table amendment? And if so, are Chair Reese and Commissioner Glasser available to serve on this subcommittee? Commissioner Glasser is not here, but I do know at the last meeting she stated she was comfortable being on the subcommittee. So just wanted to throw that out there, but we can get that reconfirmation when she is back from vacation.
And I will be happy to be on that subcommittee, depending on how many more housing subcommittee meetings we have to have.
I don't think we'll be having that many, maybe one max.
Okay. So, well, again, this is a discussion item, so we'll open it up for any comment.
Yeah, quick question. How will we craft the language? Are we going to start from scratch? Are we going to do we have some templates from other towns? What are we going to?
So I'll say I did a little research on this. It wasn't included in here. It just kind of some preliminary stuff. I found Idaho Springs has like a section specifically, kind of like you saw with that affordable portion that goes over the code language, and they kind of identified certain areas. So I feel like kind of looking at other cities and seeing how they appropriately did it would probably be our best route, especially cities similar to our town size. It's easier to work off of those and see, talking with them on how did it work for you, how is it working for you, and building forward. So I've done some research. Commissioner Glasser and Reese I think know all about parking now. So I think it'll be good between all of our knowledge moving forward that way.
Agreed. Yeah, I've been to 2 parking conventions now. So my only caution would be, as we craft ordinance, we understand that technology's changed, that we not write ourselves into a corner because at one point the kiosks were the way to go, and then license plate readers and other technologies came in. So I think we should move ahead. I'm not going to put my hand up and volunteer for this one, but I think this could be a very short agenda item tonight because I don't think we're going to get a lot of pushback. We've been talking about this for a long time.
Yeah, this should be relatively quick. Again, we're just really wanting to create that uniformity. Wow, I'm just messing up every word tonight. It's been a really long day. We're on like hour 13 for me. And so we're just really looking, like, if private owners are going to do this, we want the town and the private owners, so people aren't, visitors and residents aren't coming in here and getting confused on, in my kiosk, in my QR code. We know it's going phone based, so probably looking towards a phone based system versus a kiosk.
Not yet.
Read the book.
Yep. Yeah, I've got a whole library.
Okay. So any other comments from commission members? It sounds like a reasonable way to proceed.
I don't know that we've actually had much. We've certainly had the hearings in the SRU. We have not, as a commission, discussed paid parking, like in the visitor center or First Street. I mean, the town going to paid parking. Yes, I'm an old timer. I've been consistent all night. I just feel strongly opposed to paid parking in the visitor center and First Street. To clarify parking for private lots certainly needs to be done. That's all I really want to say. I don't think very many towns in Boulder County have paid parking.
Boulder does.
Boulder does.
Boulder, Lyons,
Lyons,
Idaho.
Longmont.
Yeah, it's more
They
so
all
to
do.
encourage like like circulation, because we do see a lot of people that are going to Eldora that just park there all day, and that's not really encouraging other people's to want to stop because there's no parking. Where
I
paid parking
understand.
would, but for our residents, there's still this idea when, at least when we were originally talking, I'm not sure how it's going to go with the subcommittee of if it's, residents creating that like pass for them or things like that, identifying where it's most appropriate. And so really just encouraging that, just kind of circulation.
I'll work with the team, but yeah, it's just, again.
No, it's a reasonable.
Maybe there's a way of doing it and figuring it out, but again, I see a 2-hour limit there, but I see even business owners parking there 24/7, in front of the donut shop. Same cars, same people, and they're actually the ones that work in town. So
What about paid parking on weekends only? I mean, that's when it's really a cluster. I mean, is that an option?
Yeah, so it's options that I think the subcommittee will probably end up chatting about and then bringing to you guys, because there are places that do weekend only, or they have like after hours on like Friday night, Saturday night, that kind of thing. So I think these are all ideas that the subcommittee we've identified, okay, there's this parking we need, we have a study going on for it now. Here's the paid parking, let's make the language most appropriate. Does that make sense for the weekends? Does that make sense all the time? Is it seasonal? These are all options, and it's done differently everywhere. So I think it's something we'll really kind of narrow down on, and just kind of go based on what we're seeing in the area.
It's a great idea.
So really, the question tonight is to turn the subcommittee loose on this. Is that?
Yeah, are you guys okay with the 2 members we are asking, and we've gotten their okay?
Okay. All right. Any public out there? Wendy still there? Does any public want to comment on this item? Discussion item?
No, thanks.
Okay. All right. I guess, are there any other questions, comments? Otherwise, we'll move on. Okay. Move on to, I guess it's 6.2 now, right? As opposed to 3. I do have the old.
Yeah, we swapped them all out. So I'll try to make this short and sweet.
Animals ordinance.
Last meeting, you guys really asked the animal subcommittee and town staff just really the subcommittee to try to figure out this variance process. How are we gonna, there are animals that we're not listing, and we want the opportunity to people to have that opportunity to do it. One, After speaking, with Attorney Madison, which I'm going to have her explain some of this. She does it much better than I do, but she brought up a lot of great points. One, it's really not appropriate to call it a variance. There's a lot of code language we have to think further about, criteria. Who decides this? Does the planning commission decide it? Does the board of trustees decide it? What's considered in this decision-making process? Is there criteria related to the decision or to the process for the review? Or does the decision just solely lie on the discretion of the planning commission? And so we really would need more time. It's something that, so an example question that I think would probably explain this more appropriate. If one person is allowed to have a pig, will the other properties owners be allowed to have pigs, or do each one of them need to apply for the variance? Because if you say yes to one pig and you say no to another, we're starting all this. It's going to be a commotion. So Attorney Madison had informed the team when drafting this language to ensure the variance process is applied fairly. Typically, a process or some kind of criteria helps to ensure the decisions are not arbitrary. Attorney Madison also noted that the variance is, again, this is what I was speaking out earlier, is typically a term used for land use zoning requirements. Therefore, it would not be an appropriate term for this process. Another concern that was a great one she brought up was that if town gives a permit to a property owner, that the permit could be considered a property right. The town could not take that permit away without proceeding through some due process steps, such as a notice and hearing. Whereas if town allowed llamas without a permit and they wanted to make llamas unlawful, the town could do so without providing a due process. So after reviewing some of these complexities with Attorney Madison, town staff is really, we wanted to bring this to your attention and see, do you want us to keep moving forward or not? An option could be, which is kind of town staff recommendation, is that the board can consider not having a variance process, as we're calling it, and instead work with the board of trustees to amend the ordinance. Should there ever be a desire to allow another animal type that is not currently on the permitted code, town staff could support this recommendation. So for instance, as of last meeting, we're not allowing sheep. If I got 6 people that asked me for sheep over time, it's something that I would come to the planning commission and say, or the board of trustees and say, hey, we keep getting this request for sheep. Should we add sheep? It's much easier to add sheep instead of having this process that really just requires a lot more town staff time, a lot more of Attorney Madison's time. It's easier to add this than to just go through this entire process. Attorney Madison, I don't know if you want to speak more on that, because I kind of went through it fast since it's getting pretty late here. But did you want to say anything else?
I really think that you've covered it all. The whole gist of the suggestion to maybe not go forward with the variance is that it would probably be just as easy for somebody to come forward asking for a change of code, which would then be uniformly applied to everybody in town, rather than going through that variance process. And in addition to somebody, 6 people coming to Brit to ask for sheeps to be added to code, people can always write into the Board of Trustees, to the Planning Commission, to ask for those code changes as residents and as members of the town.
Okay, so what we're hearing is that it sounds like it's easier to change the code than to come up with a process, an alternative process that involves a lot more subjective staff time. Is that correct?
I think that's a good summary. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I think one of the reasons I know that we had asked to look into this was to see what the options are, but after hearing all of this, I feel now it's probably a lot easier to go with the code and then change the code as if we get requests for animals or additional pipes. So, but I think it's good to still let everybody sort of chime in here because we want to get this thing's wrapped up as quickly as possible as well. So, and maybe we'll just let the subcommittee folks chime in first.
Well, this was one of the options from a month ago, so I think it's actually a clear option. And although, yeah, I think in the end, it's clearer and final by changing a code. So amending the code is actually clear and it'll be a final issue and not having, whether Board of Trustees or Planning Commission, they have to kind of make a murky what if decision on, what is the criteria. So just change the code. And I don't know how many times have you looked through our codes, the code has probably been changed 300 or 400 times over the 20 years. So it's something that we do quite often, and we're working on two of them right now. And I think adding an animal would probably take just a few minutes of recommendation and the board approval too, same thing. We would certainly be keeping the same criteria for hoofed animals of mountain residential. So we're not changing the use group. So that's important to also know too, that for at least that category, not for pets. So that's all I really have to say. And I encourage us to approve and get this, on the agenda for next month so we can see a final draft.
Mike?
Yep. So last time I felt it was important to have a process for adding an animal. And thank you to Britt for doing all the legwork to show me the hard evidence that it's actually easier to have the Planning Commission and the existing process for changing code be that process than
It's still
going
is
to
a
town.
process, yeah.
It still is a process. It's also cheaper for the individual because it was going to cost well over $1,000 with the escrow and stuff. Don't need to go into the detail, but I've come around. Yeah.
Okay. Start with Tom. Any comments?
Just a job well done. Thank you.
Jeff?
I agree. I'm glad that for something that is not a current issue for these three animals, the pigs, cows, and sheep, I'm glad now that we're going to allow at least wait until there's a rush of people with those animals before we decide that we're going to figure out a process to allow them. So I agree this is a good solution.
Like you said, this is the process.
What about all the sheep I brought back from Scotland with? We'll have to
They'll
deal.
be our town mayors, like
Yeah,
Frank the cat.
There you go. Stephanie, comments?
No, nothing in addition. Nice job, guys. It's a long road. Good job.
Chris? You're muted.
Chris, you're muted.
Muted. Okay, until he unmutes. Tim?
No, I don't have anything more
No,
to add.
no comment. Okay. Hello, Chris? Okay. The joys of hybrid meetings.
Perfect. Well, I will
Okay.
say, with that, we will move forward and present a final draft next.
Okay,
The same
so,
meeting.
so we'll see the final draft,
You will.
final draft on animals and then also on the housing next month.
Correct.
And what else do we have next month?
Let's see here. We have, so if ready, which I don't think probably next month, we'll probably push it to November for the parking. So probably push that, maybe some more discussion on STRs if we have time, but I'm thinking that will also probably be November. So
Okay.
we'll see how it goes. Other than that, nothing. Yeah, housing and animals, which you mentioned, yeah.
I'm not sure if this is an appropriate time to mention it, but on the calendar, the next meeting is the day before Thanksgiving.
It's probably very appropriate.
Yes, it is. I think
Okay.
typically I've heard it's gotten pushed out. I don't know.
Not the next
Yeah.
meeting, the meeting.
Sorry,
November's.
the November meeting.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the past, we've combined the November and December meetings. into one
Gotcha.
and
Okay.
put them kind of in between.
That's probably
Okay.
appropriate.
So you don't impact Christmas and
Gotcha.
Thanksgiving.
Okay.
Right,
Yeah, I'd have a,
something like that, yeah, somewhere in
Great.
between.
You
Okay.
know,
Okay,
that
well-
only depended upon if we don't have a bunch of stuff that we gotta meet on though, if we can combine that meeting.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yep.
We may end up having two, but we'll see. But yes, we'll move it from Thanksgiving for sure. Okay, well, that wraps up discussion items. Does anyone, just want to make sure, was there anyone in the audience that had any issues with animals? I don't think we have a public anymore. Okay. All right.
We're all public.
The town staff report?
Yes, so I'm just gonna go over it briefly because I did not fully read through this. I'm not sure if Miranda had mentioned it last time, but I think she did. We lost Mark Hall, our streets manager, and Josh Davis, who's been on the team, moved up into that streets manager role. He's got, a little different mindset, but still going with the same momentum that Mark was. Great addition to the team. You can read Mark's farewell letter and Josh's hello. Let's see, Miranda is going to be attending a conference. She got a scholarship from the Colorado City and County Management Association to attend the ICMA conference in Austin, Texas. So she'll be doing that, I believe, the first week of October. Yeah. So she will be gone. Let's see, broadband. We're working on broadband with Gilpin and Clear Creek. We will be submitting an application for capital project funds through the U.S. Department of Treasury. The capital project funds provides $10 billion to states, territories, freely associated states, and tribal governments to fund crucial capital projects. So we're really trying to work on that broadband. We meet every single week. Let's see. Let's go. Colorado, a wildfire protection plan. We have CWPP. We've been working. There's been a lot of workshops going on. There will be one next Saturday. Boulder County will be here. And they will be doing a workshop. I will be participating from a town staff perspective. Encourage you guys to come. It is from 10 to 12. And so feel free to show up. Let's see, I'm gonna see. I don't believe there's any more that are coming to this area. So they've been kind of going from northeast, southeast, southwest, and just getting the community to participate in kind of drawing these maps. I can send more information to you guys on that. Let's see here, Public Works. So Parks is really pushing through with that Barker Meadows project. It's almost done. Dog waste stations are up. Let's see, Streets Department, I already kind of told you what's going on there. Utilities, we had a new individual join our team in August. Her name is Paige. She is a Nederland resident. Her background is in environmental studies through CU. She is already operating the excavator to install a new fire hydrant. There's some photos in here which you can see. They also worked with High Performance Excavating this month to abandon or to get rid of an abandoned service line, something that Utilities has been working on. Some new taps went in, so about 45 hydrants were flushed and inspected, and they're working on replacing some of those. Let's see, community staff report. My reports are usually about you guys, so you know everything that you need to know. Peter, Destination Blueprint, still working with that. It looks like they're working with a couple different stakeholders, and then continuing to push through with that project. The branding and marketing strategy project, they have signed a contract with someone. And so they're planning to move forward with that, and you can kind of read more about that New EcoPass update. I feel like that's an important one. So RTD is now going QR code. So they're going to be getting rid of all of the cards. Let's see. I'm not sure that it says here, but I know it's in a couple months. You can come see it at Town Hall. They're going to be getting rid of all cards. You now have to download the app. We still provide the eco passes, but instead you come in to Town Hall, you download this app, we send you a confirmation email, it then sets up your account. They no longer want to do the cards. And so it's been a quick learning process for town staff, but I'll say Karina's got it dialed in, coming pretty quickly. So any of you that do have eco passes, in a couple of months, you will, if you're riding the bus, you will find out they're going to start saying, hey, you have to go do this. We're not accepting these anymore. So I would recommend updating, telling your friends, your neighbors, come update those. Let's get these QR codes.
So you just download the app?
Yep.
And then, do you still have to come into the town hall to do it?
No, so I could probably actually send you guys out.
Send us.
Yeah,
instructions,
Karina
that would
checks
be-
them. I think it's like twice a day, and then she submits those, like they have been approved, it then submits, you got to confirm your email. And then your app, it won't so they're still, RTD is still working out some kinks. It doesn't tell you your pass is there, but once it's been approved through Karina, it does, and you do get that email confirmation. So I can send out that, and if you guys want to just start doing that from your home, and maybe you can check in with us, but we are waiting. We know there's going to be an influx of people because we're trying to get this information out now. It is going to be changing. We're going to be posting it, really using Peter to get that community engagement out to hopefully that way people aren't getting on the bus and they're like, nope, we're not taking this anymore.
One other RTD update, I'm on that board for EcoPass. We're going, COVID actually made our sinking fund go up considerably. So we're taking a strong look at opening up free bus passes for anybody that's an employee that doesn't live here to come up the hill. I think it'll help us with recruiting, and also youth fairs are going. Youth will ride for free starting next year. There's some changes that are only going in the right direction if you're into ridership on RTD.
Oh, okay, good.
Thank you for that.
So anyway, as long as we have instructions on what to do.
Yep. Yeah. And a lot of people have just been coming into town hall, but it's something we're going to be getting out on all of our engagement. Another thing is town has officially taken over the Nederland Holiday Mountain Market. So this will be our first year taking that over. Peter is kind of working on the market layout. We're looking to maybe change some things. We got a lot of great ideas from the youth advisory board. Peter kind of gave them this idea last time, and we were talking silent auctions. Is this something we still want to do? Some of myself and some of the youth board brought up DIY workshops, things like that, to really create this community event and also get more people, seeing some of these vendors. We've seen a lot of applications come in. If you know anyone interested, that's all running through Peter now. And yeah, that's pretty much about it. Yeah. Any questions?
Is that all you got?
I can keep going if you like.
Good.
Yes. I would entertain a motion to.
All right, thank you. All right, any other business to bring up?
So one last question. We're meeting in obviously October is going forward, and what happens in November? We're just going to move it forward or back?
What we've done in the past, depending upon how full the docket is that we combine the December and November meeting into one meeting. It was typically early December.
Okay.
Between the holidays. If we got too much going on, then we have moved, correct me if I'm wrong, Roger, we've moved the November one up to like mid-November.
Mm-hmm.
And then we do our December one in mid-December,
Mm-hmm.
Away from the holidays. So
Cool.
we're just going to have to look at our schedule and decide whether we can combine into one meeting or not.
Yeah, I think we'll have more action items next meeting, and then after that, we'll really depend on the subcommittee's movement. And so I have a feeling we'll end up combining them, but we'll see how fast our subcommittees move.
See what the
Put that on
board
the-
sends us.
Okay.
Make sure that we discuss that next month.
Last question.
Yeah, we will definitely.
In one word, describe Scotland.
More sheep than people, and that's why we don't want sheep here. That are
Have enough.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Perfect.
Aye.
10:27.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, folks. Have a good evening.
Okay. Good evening. Stephanie, we'll see you tomorrow.